Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, it's Coronavirus Shut-In Week 2.
Yes, it's the Week 2 of the Plague Cast.
Yes, the Weekly Stuff Plague Cast. We've got a lot on the docket today. We are going to give first impressions of Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing New Horizons. We had a big week for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. PS5 had a big event. Series X had a couple more details. And then our main topic today is going to be a crossover with our sister show, Weekly Suit Gundam, where we are finally doing part 2 of our Evangelion episode, and we will be talking about the end of Evangelion. Not the end of the TV show, Neon Genesis Evangelion, the movie, The End of Evangelion, that replaces the end of Evangelion.
Exactly, yes.
Yes.
I think it's all very clear. There's no way that anyone can ever be confused about what we refer to when we say we're going to talk about the end of Evangelion.
Exactly. It's Hideaki Anno. Thank you for making such a clear, explicable series.
Yes, exactly. I'm very happy that we can talk about the second versions of episodes 25 and 26 of the End of Evangelion, because the movie literally does that.
Yep, it's a thing. So we will be doing all that on the show today. But Sean, I think we should probably just start with our weekly coronavirus check-in. So how have you been doing? You are in a nicer chair this week.
Yes. So I stole my mom's office chair, because I only have crap chairs over here, because I usually don't have to do home like office type work at home. If I have to do extra grading, I usually try to keep everything at the school, so that I'm not doing a bunch of grading at home.
Where you have an office.
Yes, where I have an office and they've given me a nice chair and I have a nice desktop computer and all that shit. And instead, I have to now do all that stuff at home for at least the next 3 weeks, because the governor has basically declared, hey, schools do not have any school until at least April 17th. We'll see if we might extend it past that. Probably going to extend it past that. But that means at least I know for sure, because this week is my spring break, which is really just hey, figure out how the fuck you're going to teach digitally for at least 3 more weeks after this. What a fun spring break this is going to be. But that means that I'm going to have to figure out all that and do grading and create online lessons, and we are not equipped to just transition easily into that. And so that's a lot of me trying to figure out, well, what am I going, because it was very easy to do 1 week of it, because I didn't have to think too much about I'll just do the same general kind of thing on both the days, the technical days that we have to teach. And then now it's I can't do that for 3 weeks worth of lessons. I have to come up with some other ideas. So I'll come up with some other ideas.
You're going to watch Romeo and Juliet. You're going to watch the Leo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet. You're going to watch the Haley Steinfeld Romeo and Juliet. You're going to watch the BBC Romeo and Juliet, all 5 of them.
Yeah, I know you already wrote your Romeo and Juliet essay. I know that I said that we were done with this, but I just don't want to have to think about anything else. So,
Sean,
here's 7 different versions of R and J that we can watch.
Okay, so students, your project for the semester now is you have to watch at least 20 versions of Romeo and Juliet and make me a top 10 list of your 10 favorite Romeo and Juliets. Go. That's what I would do, because I'm weird and OCD about lists.
Yeah.
I would probably get fired.
You'd probably get fired.
Who's paying attention to you right now? Because they've got bigger problems.
I mean, it's one of the one of the weirdest feelings is this feeling of because I've never had to do any work from home kind of thing before. Because any other job I've ever had would be I can't cashier from home, right? That's not a thing you can do. So that would be fun. That'd be very convenient if you could just do that.
I think the robots are usually the ones who cashier from home. It's called Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the weird feeling about it is this constant I simultaneously feel I'm not doing enough work and I'm doing too much work, which is a very bad feeling to have, because there aren't very good parameters around when working begins and ends, what your expectations are for what you're meant to be doing, all those kinds of things, especially with the just sort of vague, do your instruction digitally kind of thing that we got, because the district wasn't prepared to do this kind of transition. It's just I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I think that feels like there's basically no oversight, but that makes me more nervous, because then that's but what if they are paying attention and I just don't know they're paying attention, because it's not someone's walking into my an admin is walking into my classroom and observing a lesson. Obviously that's not happening. But is there some like nefarious other means that people are checking in to see what I'm doing and make sure that I'm not fucking everything up?
You're going to be wearing a fucking tinfoil hat by the time this is over, Sean.
I mean, it's basically what it feels like. It's you know, eventually I'm going to be like, no, you don't understand the coronavirus. You can get it through the internet. It's not just a people virus. It's a computer virus too. It's going to get us all.
Yep, we will be selling supplements soon to protect you from the coronavirus.
I'm going to build a cabin out in the mountains. I'm going to just like schedule a bunch of random posts on Google Classroom and let them figure it out. And I'm going to go build a cabin up on Green Mountain and live there.
Sounds good.
This is my goal.
All right. Well, I have not done any work in the past week because I was on spring break anyway. And then they extended our spring break by an extra week, so we do not start our digital classes until March 30th. Nice. But the reason they extended it the extra week is we are off for the rest of the semester. We're done.
Right.
I mean, we're not done, but we're not in the buildings. They have shut down the campus. You cannot go anywhere.
I mean, colleges end their semester sooner than public schools.
That's true.
Because we go up till almost the end of May.
Right.
So there's still a lot of school left for us. Exactly.
I think our finals week is finished May 15th, and like obviously classes are a week before that. So. Yeah, so we're going to be doing all digital. I'm in the lucky position of, I'm a teaching assistant, so the professor is the one who is tasked with figuring all that out. Uh-huh. So I'm like, okay, I'll do whatever you need me to do, but I will be doing seminars via Zoom, which means I will probably have my Nintendo Switch out of frame and be like, yeah, no, Kierkegaard, great. We don't read Kierkegaard, I don't know why I said that, but just, Deleuze, yeah, no, really, psychoanalysis, yeah, Tom Nook. I'm gonna get you them bells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This week we're going to focus on Marxist analysis, and we're going to use Tom Nook as our main lens, which we're going to view capitalism.
Yeah.
And landlords.
My adventure, I think, is going to be, I still presumably have to write my seminar papers.
Probably, yeah.
Without access to a library. That's going to be fun.
Interesting, yeah.
And that'll probably be okay. You can get most stuff online.
Yeah.
But I've never had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I always have usually checked out at least a couple of books. I have all my resources. Obviously, I have databases and stuff. But that'll just be also usually when I'm writing, I go places. I go to a library and study, and so now I'll go to a different room in this house. Mm-hmm. And figure that out. And I know a lot of people
you can come into my cabin up on Green Mountain as long as you sterilize
thank you.
Beforehand.
Are you going to have a station, a tent outside where you spray me down like it's fucking Chernobyl?
Yes, yeah. It's basically an airlock, yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. So now I'm imagining you just slowly aging into Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec.
That's basically what's going to happen.
I think that makes sense for you. Anyway... Yeah, so that's coronavirus week 2. I have not been out of the house much. Let's see.
I try to take walks around the neighborhood at least once a day to
that's good.
Maintain some level of sanity.
Yeah, I've been outside with my dogs. I went to the grocery store once, and that was a harrowing experience.
Yeah. It's very eerie to see a spaghetti aisle that has no spaghetti on it.
It's very weird. Yeah. The grocery store I went to, at least, there was the canned goods aisle was just empty. The toilet paper aisle was empty, and the eggs and dairy were empty. So you would walk through the grocery store, and some aisles, cereal was a little empty, but mostly cereal was still there. So you go from a normal grocery aisle to this looks like a scene from Zombieland.
Exactly.
And Woody Harrelson is going to come in here looking for his fucking Twinkies.
Yeah, this is a preview of Last of Us Part 2.
Yes.
Basically, is what you're seeing.
Which will probably get delayed.
Yeah.
All right. So, I don't know. The world's crazy. Senators and Congress people still don't have a way to remotely vote and are all just flying around the country and then back into a packed little room where the way they vote is they all physically touch the same machine.
Which is smart.
Yep. Which is smart. Yeah.
I mean, if you want to clear the swamp, this is how we do it, right? You just get all the old people, have them all touch the same fucking button. They all get the coronavirus.
After they have flown to literally all 50 states.
Yes, and we just, it's a bad time right now, but if you are very frustrated about the number of incumbents in your district, hey, here we go. Democracy in action, baby.
I don't think any of us thought that having the leading contenders for the presidency all be over 70 was a good idea, but now it seems like an actively terrifying one.
Yeah.
Because, love or hate Joe Biden, I don't want him to die in the middle of this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anywho, so coronavirus, it's cray. Let's talk about something completely frivolous for a second, Sean.
Okay.
How therapeutic has Doom Eternal been for you this week?
It's been good. Yeah, I haven't like put a huge amount of time into it yet. I'm like basically halfway through level 3. And then I paused it because you were coming over. Like, okay, I should probably actually like make sure I remember shit to do on the podcast. And one of the main reasons why is because I finished Yakuza 4, very good, 2 thumbs up. There's some fucking bonkers shit that happens at the end of that game, and it has one of like my favorite shots in anything ever, which is a helicopter descending onto a like ridiculous like the Joker in Dark Knight level of just ridiculous pile of money, and the money just scattering off the top of the skyscraper. It's so good. It's like primo fucking Yakuza shit, and I'm like, I love this image. It is everything to be watching all this money scatter as this helicopter descends onto this platform on a skyscraper. It's very good.
Shouldn't the ranking for Yakuza not be 2 thumbs up, but 2 pinkies cut off?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, two ritual cut off pinkies for Yakuza 4.
Do they ever like do that in the games as like a mini game where like you have to mash 0 to?
No, there's not a huge amount of pinky cutting. Because like the dark secret of Yakuza games is that Kiryu's only a member of the Yakuza for like 5 minutes. I mean, in Yakuza 0, he is for a lot of that game. And then he's in like the prologue of Yakuza 1, but then he goes to jail, and then once he's out of jail, he's not really a member of the Tojo clan anymore. And so he's
Yakuza adjacent.
Yeah, he's very important to the Yakuza, but he's not technically a Yakuza for almost any of the games.
He is like a dragon. He's not a dragon.
Exactly, yes. Ryuga Gotoku. That's what the situation he's in. So there's a little, like, Yakuza 0 has a great pinky cutting scene. Yakuza 4 has a good one, but there's not as much as you would expect. Not as much as, like, a standard Yakuza film.
Right.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, so I finished Yakuza 4, very good. The way they use Kiryu in that game is also just fucking perfect, because he's the last of the 4 protagonists you play as. And they do this really smart thing of where he has... It's kind of like a Metroid game in that, you know how when you start a Metroid game, usually you have all the upgrades from the last game, but then Metroid, like, you know, fucks you over and then says, like, oh, now you lose all of them, now you have to get missiles and fucking shit again for the 500th time in this franchise. Yakuza 4 does the same thing, only doesn't take it away from you. So you start with almost all of the upgrades you had from Yakuza 3, which means Kiryu's just a fucking beast in this game, and he just... Like, because he, like, Yakuza, like, really high... It's not every skill he had in Yakuza 3, but most of them. So it's, like, really high-level Kiryu from Yakuza 3 is, like, the baseline, and then you just go up from there. And he also levels up faster than any other character in the game, so he just gets more powerful ridiculously quickly.
Nice.
And it's just so smart. It's so... Because as soon as you cut to him, like, the incredible power fantasy you get of going from... Who is, like, kind of one of the slower characters in the game, Tanimura, who's, like, very kind of... His moveset is very, like, counter and grab focused. And Kiryu doesn't give a shit. He just, like, fucks everybody up. And that's really great. And then later they have him do... It's the classic sort of superhero team-up thing of where before you have all the heroes team up, they have to fight each other first. So Kiryu, they have a boss fight where he fights 2 of the other protagonists from the game at the same time, and they're fucking chumps. Like, you just bulldoze through them, and it's so good. It's such an expressive way to use that because it's also because you just, like, they're pretty easy enemies. You beat both of them, and the cutscene afterwards is both of them, like, knocked with their asses on the ground. Kiryu standing up and says, like, anyways, I'm gonna go now. Like, basically, like you're gonna let me go through. And they're just like, who the fuck was that guy? As Kiryu just sort of saunters away, and it's such a great feeling that contextualizes like everything of like who the characters you've been playing to up to now are in the scale of the world. Like, you've been playing as like Krillin and Tenshinhan, and Goku has shown up is basically what it feels like, and it's fucking awesome.
Yes, and then Goku for some reason beats the shit out of Krillin and Tenshinhan.
You know, I mean, it's a world martial arts tournament. He's kicked their asses.
That's true. That's true.
So yeah, Yakuza 4, great game. I'm gonna save Yakuza 5 for sometime during the summer because a lot of stuff is coming out right now.
Theoretically coming out.
Yes. And then after I finished Yakuza 4, there was like a day between that and Doom Eternal coming out. So it's like, I'm going to put a little bit of time into Doom 2016. And then I just played all the way through that game. And it took me like 2.5 days. So that's why like I only finished that game like last night. So I started Doom Eternal a little bit last night and then I've been playing it this morning.
Awesome.
Basically.
Yeah. I wound up playing a little bit of the original Doom, and by original Doom I mean the original Doom, 93.
Yeah.
Because they've released all those new ports of Doom, Doom 2, Doom 3 on all the systems, and they came out kind of rocky, and then they've improved them, and now they are some of the best classic game ports I've ever seen. Certainly
yeah, I've played a little bit of 1993 Doom on the PS4, and it's a very good port.
It's so good, and I have never, I've played Doom, obviously, I've played a couple levels here and there. I've never, sat in and been I'm going to play an entire Doom campaign. And I did. I sat down and played the first one, because Doom is 4 campaigns, whatever that first one is called.
Yeah.
I played the whole thing in one sitting. That's one of the best fucking games ever made, Sean.
It's very fucking good, right? Yeah.
It takes a level or two just to adjust that, okay, you're not moving up and down, or you don't have a Y-axis, you have an X-axis for movement. You shoot your shotgun, it'll shoot anything on screen on the Y-axis. The movement's a little, just get used to it, and then it hasn't aged a fucking day.
Yeah.
It's so good. I love the format of you are basically a rat in a maze, but you get to shoot things. And it's Doom shooting things, so it's the best shooting things. That's a great game. And I honestly, when Doom Eternal came out, I was like, I just want to play more original Doom. But Doom Eternal is really good. So once Doom Eternal is over, I have a bunch of Doom to play, including Doom 64, which we all got for free, which is awesome. I've never gotten to play that one.
I've never touched that at all. Yeah.
I did play the first level because I downloaded Doom 64 and because I wanted to see what it looked like and everything. Gorgeous. It's because it's more of an HDified port than the other ones. And it looks really cool. So, one of the best N64 ports I've ever seen. So, anywho, plenty of Doom to play.
Yeah.
But what do you think of Doom Eternal so far?
I like it a lot. It's way more different from Doom 2016 than I was expecting.
Me too.
It is, which I think is good. And I feel like it's a very extreme version of that first game. They've kind of pushed everything to its most extreme level.
It feels like it starts where 2016 ends.
Basically, yeah. It definitely, which was nice that that is what I did. I finished that game for the 3rd time or whatever on Ultraviolence, and then immediately started playing the first level of Doom Eternal. And they basically take all the building blocks of the first game and just turn the dials up to 11. So it's in Doom 2016, I used the chainsaw maybe 4 times in this most recent playthrough because you have so much ammo, you almost never need to use the chainsaw.
I use it all the time.
It is requisite. You have to use it in Doom Eternal. You don't even have an infinite ammo gun. You don't even have the pistol from Doom 2016, which they gave you as just in case you run out of ammo. And even if you play that game on the hardest difficulty, Nightmare, you never run out of ammo in Doom 2016. In Doom Eternal, you absolutely will start running out of ammo, particularly early on when you only have 1 or 2 guns. And that was that moment of I was struggling with the game a lot, and I was oh, I have the fucking chainsaw. I have this grenade. You have all these abilities that you had most of these in Doom 2016, and you just never have to use them. I used the BFG twice. I'm nowhere near close to wherever you get the BFG in Doom Eternal, but I imagine once I do get there, that's going to be an essential piece of the tool set, because so far in Doom Eternal, every single gun has been essential. Every single alt fire on your guns is essential. Your equipment is essential. I just got the freeze bombs recently.
They're very helpful.
Is absolutely vital. You need to make sure you're getting glory kills. You need to use your flame belch thing to get armor. Every single piece of the combat routine is absolutely vital compared to Doom 2016, where even on the hardest difficulties in that game, past a certain point, unless you're a big fan of the assault rifle in that game, you're never going to use that assault rifle once you get the super shotgun. Everything else in that game is just gravy. It's just super shotgun all the time. And then if you have to shoot something with the Gauss rifle or rocket launcher, you'll do that, but then you go back to a super shotgun. And in Doom Eternal, it's no, I am switching between weapons constantly, both because I'm running out of ammo, and because enemies are vulnerable to specific things in different ways, so it behooves you to be switching around and using every piece of your arsenal. And that has been a big adjustment, but I think I like it a lot.
I do too. I think it's the biggest improvement over Doom 2016, is the sense that you have to make use of everything. Because this is a brutally hard game.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I started playing it on Ultraviolence, because I beat Doom 2016 on Ultraviolence, and it ultimately, the 3rd level is what made me tap out, tap on the shoulder, and I went down to Hurt Me Plenty, and I'm I probably will play this on Ultraviolence eventually, but this is Because when I'm trying to go through and do a 100% run and find everything and do all the little things on the side, like it was just like stressing me out too much. Like level 3 took me like 5 hours to beat. It's really, and that's my biggest problem with the game so far. I think level 3 is a slog. Every other level's great. I don't really like that level, but everything else is great. And yeah, you have because they've added onto your arsenal. You basically have most of what you had in 2016 plus some new stuff. But you're right, like frag grenades. I'm sure I did use them in 2016. I don't remember ever using them.
Yeah, you get. I was so shocked by this because again, I played through Doom 2016 twice. I played it on ultra violence and then on nightmare difficulty, and then now I played through it for the third time. So I know the game very well. Like a lot of the secrets and stuff, I basically remembered where they were for like the more confusing ones. And then I picked up a hologram device in that game. I was like, this game had this? And I just realized, like, I don't think I ever used this in Doom. Like, the other 2 times I played it, I'm going to try to use this, and I forgot to use it, and then never used it for the whole third playthrough. Like, there's a thing in that game I literally think I've never used in the combat once. Because the equipment is so... It's just not particularly useful, and it's like... It's never the best choice to make in any combat situation, and it's never the second or third or fourth best choice. It's always like... I guess I could throw that grenade, or I guess I could deploy this hologram. That probably does something. I don't know. Yeah. Whereas in Doom Eternal, there's like a lot of different things that are vying for that. This is the best or like second best choice for me to be making in this combat scenario right now, and one of them is going to be using a fucking frag grenade.
Yeah, because I'm about halfway through the game, and I think I have all but one gun. At least my wheel is filled in with one missing. And I'll just tell you, in most combat encounters, I use every gun at some point. Because you go through the wheel, and you will never have enough ammo to just get through that with one gun, which, like in Doom 2016, again, like you said, once you have that super shotgun, you are never letting that baby go.
Yeah.
It's and this time, like, I'll use the super shotgun, usually, but I'm reserving it for, like, big enemies that I can take out with 2 or 3 hits. But like, because also I think some of the guns they've just made better. Like the machine gun is so much, like it's one of my favorites now. It's really good to use. The plasma gun has always been one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites in 93 Doom. I think they've made it better. It has a really cool, one of the weapon upgrades is this heat thing where like it heats up as you fire, and then you can press L2 and just release it, and it'll just like little enemies will just tear them apart and cover your screen in blood. Good. It's great.
I also love that they redesigned it to look more like the plasma rifle from the original Doom. Instead of it had like a sort of generic plasma rifle look in Doom 2016, and now it has that like. This looks like a movie prop that someone made out of like 3 different vacuum cleaner look, which is what the old model has, and they brought it back. I gotta ask, are you rocking the classic Doom pose or the new like side pose? I don't remember, because is that something you do in the like for the multiplayer stuff?
No, in the menus you can change it so that the gun is in the center.
That I thought you meant like character model.
No.
I'm having like the default if it's on like the right side of the screen.
Yeah,
I moved it to the middle and it felt disorienting to me. I'm like, I like middle gun, but I don't know if I need it in 2020.
That's fine. I am rocking middle gun, and one I just think like there are some guns like the plasma one that they got so perfect to Doom like 93.
It's just a big fucking like box sticking out of the middle. Yeah,
it's perfect. And there was also something like this game, like Doom 2016 was fast. Doom Eternal is even faster.
Oh yeah,
it's so fast. I know it doesn't technically change anything because your reticle stays the same no matter what, but there was something psychologically to me about moving it from the side to the center that made it easier for me to aim. Like I just like it was all like that's where I'm looking and like that's the center, and I know it's purely psychological, but it helped me out, and I've come to really, really enjoy it because like there are some guns that like they look cool in the normal like default 2020 side view, but the classic shotgun or the super shotgun, I'm sorry, there's no better way to view that than like dead on center.
Yeah, I'm like literally about to. I think I was like about to walk into the super shotgun before you came over. Yeah. So maybe now that I have the super shotgun, maybe I'll give that another try.
Because you can just toggle it on and off, and you can see, and it's really fun. They apparently added it to Doom 2016 after I played it, because I played that game when it launched like literally twice in a row back to back and platinumed it, and then I have not played it a ton since then. But yeah, the Doom Eternal is very good. I expressed some worries on Twitter after my first 2 days where I was like, basically after level 3, I was like, did they layer too much onto this? Because there's a lot in this game. Yeah. And I will say 6 or 7 levels in, I feel much more confident that it's it is a good mix and they've balanced it all well. But like, if you're feeling like it's a little bit of overkill, give it some time, because there's an elegance to the largesse that I just think takes a little time to reveal itself.
Yeah, it feels like it's the kind of game that has a very steep climb up to. Like, it's almost like a Dark Souls, or like, in fact, I've been thinking about it because Neo 2 just came out, but it reminds me of Neo a little bit, or also Dante from Devil May Cry 4 or 5, where there's so much available to you that it takes such a long time to adjust and get used to the combat sort of routine and cycle. And so, yeah, it is definitely one that I think it is going to be off-putting to people maybe early in the early going, especially if you haven't played the first one in a while.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like a very like sharp ramp up to like...
It's got one of the toughest first levels I've ever played.
I mean, you don't... You know, in Doom 2016, you don't fight the Hell Knights, which are like the first sort of like heavy style enemy in that game, until like level 3. And you think you start fighting them like halfway through level 1 in this one.
Yeah.
So it is.
There are what do you call them? Cacodemons?
Yeah, cacodemons are definitely like early in level 1.
Yeah, they're all over the place, and I remember them being used very sparingly in Doom 2016.
Yes, no, they don't get introduced, I think, until you go to Hell, which is like halfway through that game.
But no, I mean, it's great. And like, I've gotten into a rhythm where I've really gotten used to how the levels lay things out. And I've had fun making sure I'm 100%ing the levels as I go through, which this game facilitates much better than 2016.
Yeah. When I got to the end of the first level and a pop-up came up that said, oh, when you get to the end of a level, you can teleport back to earlier parts of the level. I'm like, oh, thank fucking God.
It's so
because
good.
That was the most frustrating thing in Doom 2016, that the majority of the levels in Doom 2016 you could backtrack as much as you needed to, but there were like 3 or 4 that had either early sections or late sections that locked you off from different parts of the map. They would put secrets there, and so if you didn't get that secret at the very beginning of the level, you could never get it until you played the level through again. And it's like, this is the smartest way to address that, because you don't have to contort your level design in such a way that you make it so that every area has to be just sort of physically accessible. Instead, it's just like, no, when you get to the end, just teleport back there. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really smart.
It's great. The map system is like... It's an evolved version of what they did in the first one, but it's very much... It's like the Metroid Prime 3D map, but done very well.
Yeah.
It's great. And I also just want to say, like, having just played 93 Doom, they did a lot of things to move this closer to original Doom, in terms of, like, the enemy designs are more pulled from that game, which I really like.
Yeah, you've got, like, the zombie soldiers, which I appreciate.
Yeah. And honestly, like what we were talking about earlier about like using all your stuff also feels more like OG Doom to me, where when you play OG Doom, like you do not have infinite ammo. Like it's you are moving between guns, and there are sometimes where it's like, all I got is this fucking pistol, and I'm gonna have to figure out how to get through this room. It's great. It's and sometimes, like, as much as you like hate it, it's like, God damn it, I want to use my shotgun. Those are also great moments, because those are like, that's when you're balls to the wall, and it's and like the exploration feels a little more like original, because they have not made it like the same kind of maze structure, but I think that the level of exploration going on makes it feel pacing wise more like original Doom than 2016 did. And none of this is really to put down 2016 Doom, just to say like, these guys are so good at what they've done. They've like built on this great foundation and made a really like kind of ultimate pastiche of all the Dooms. It's awesome. Yeah.
Like one thing with the secrets I really loved was the first time I realized that, oh shit, they just have breakable walls. Perfect. I love breakable walls. Are like there are 2 kinds of secrets in games that are the best. One is breakable walls, and the other is caves behind waterfalls. Yes. Those are the 2 best kinds of like hidden secrets in games. And I love that you just have big, like, fucking Zelda-ass walls with, like, cracks in the middle that you can walk up and punch and they explode. And there's, like, an extra life or something behind them.
Oh, punching the walls is so great. There's so much we could talk about with this game. I'm sure we are going to have a field day talking about the Doom guy has a ship now. I mean,
the whole hub is fucking crazy. It's so big. That moment after you get back from level 2 and they kind of, like, handhold you a little bit through, like, and here's some of the other areas in the ship. I'm like, this is fucking crazy. This, like, the hub is massive. And you can get little vinyl records that have classic Doom music. So I just had the E1M1 song playing while I was just, like, running around, like, seeing, like, all this crazy shit that I'm going to unlock in that hub. Yeah. It's very cool.
No, we will talk about... I am sure next week will be the Doom Eternal Deep Dive.
Yes.
And it'll be great. And we will talk all about how Mick Gordon has just, again, delivered a fucking masterpiece of a score. We will get there. Let me briefly also talk about Animal Crossing.
Yeah, so how violent is that game? You like blowing up demons and breaking through walls and shit?
I gotta tell you, now that they're both out, Animal Crossing and Doom coming out at the same time actually is perfect, because Doom Eternal, there is no level that will not get your heart rate up, because it is so intense. And like, you finish a level and you unstick from the controller that you've been gripping too tightly, and they're like, let me go pick some weeds, because Animal Crossing is like the polar opposite video game, and they weirdly complement each other very nicely. I've been playing both. I've been putting time into both. Animal Crossing is a great game to like kick back with a podcast, or like, it's on Switch, so I've been once in a while like watching a TV show and have Animal Crossing up if I'm going to pick some weeds or something, go fishing. But no, New Horizons is I'll just like, I've only played for 3 or 4 days, and I do not do time traveling and shit like that. I like to play the game right, goddammit. And so I will have much more to say next week, because the game obviously has a time progress element to it. But it is, if you have been like, even if you're someone who loves Animal Crossing, I'll say my experience was I did not realize how much I've missed it. Because it has been 7 years.
Yeah.
The last one was 2013, unless you played Pocket Camp, in which case you're bankrupt now. So you can't afford New Horizons. You probably lost your phone, too. Anyway, I'm kidding. So it has been a long time, and New Horizons definitely feels like being wrapped in a warm blanket, but with a bunch of improvements. Like, the most immediate thing for me is like, oh, this is the first Animal Crossing developed in a completely post-Minecraft world.
Right.
Yeah. Because, like, and obviously the 2013 game, Minecraft was out, but I'm sure that game was in development long enough that like it didn't fully absorb it, because this one has a lot of Minecraft elements. Like, you craft your weapons instead of buying them. You have to go around the island, and like rocks, when you hit them, you don't just go around the island hitting the rocks to find the gold rock every day. You hit them because they break out like iron ore and stones and things like that, and then you use that to build new tools, and like trees will drop different kinds of wood, and you get sticks, and you use those to build like, very flimsy items, and then you can build eventually better items. And so all of that just immediately feels a little more engrossing, because there's sort of more of a reward cycle to that. You can craft a lot of your own furniture and things too, which is really cool. So, yeah, and obviously the whole deserted island structure is fun. It does not, it doesn't like completely change the style of the game, obviously, but it is kind of a fun gimmick, especially because Tom Nook is the best part of this game so far. He has mellowed out. He has a beer gut. I don't know if you've seen this, but like look at Tom Nook in his Hawaiian shirt carrying it's like a soda can, but I just imagine he's holding a beer. He's holding a Shiner or something, and like he's walking around the island. He's like a little bit looser on the debt stuff. He's not as, he does gouge you obviously, but he's more laid back about it. He started a whole app on because you get a smartphone in this game. This is like, oh right, smartphones I guess were a thing in 2013. They weren't as big a thing. This is now 2020.
Yeah.
And you full on got a smartphone with apps. And like, so he's got a whole Nook Miles program where he's like, you don't have to pay me money, you can pay me in Nook Miles, which is like is like this in-game achievement system where you go around like catch 10 fish and you'll get Nook Miles. And it's really cool. They've done a ton to just make like playing the game, like giving you more direction, making progress feel smoother. It's really fun to throw time into, and it definitely hits that right Animal Crossing balance for me, where you play it for an hour, maybe max 2 a day, and you feel good, and then you want to come back to it the next day. Because I think the wrong thing with this kind of game is if you were playing it like 8 hours a day, you would just burn out very fast. I like when it's balanced for the right, and you could obviously, and I've seen some people do it where they've, instead of like they're waiting for the museum to open, so they've just stacked creatures all around the museum site. Have you seen this, Sean?
I've seen vague talks about the ridiculous measures people are going to binge the game, especially because it's weird like quarantine situation people are in. It's like Animal Crossing is both the best and worst game for the situation, because it's the best because it's so relaxing. It's the worst because it's designed for you to play a couple of hours a day,
right?
Tops, and instead people are like, I'm going to I'm going to min-max the shit out of this game, and yes, I'm going to stack shit around the museum and all that.
People are like money-balling Animal Crossing, and I'm like, no, just enjoy it. Just go with the flow. You're on a deserted island. The residents are all fucking hilarious and great. Blathers, who is the owl who runs the museum, the writing for Blathers is so good because he will give you a little lecture on every item you bring in, and they're very funny. I will have to post them on Twitter because I've been screenshotting constantly. Like the writing in general, Animal Crossing writing has always been good. I feel like it feels like they got the people from Paper Mario Color Splash, and they're like the fucking geniuses who wrote that game, and like do some Animal Crossing writing because it's very smart and funny throughout. There's a lot of good stuff. The game makes me laugh, and it's also gorgeous, which is part of that is just the shock of like, oh right, Animal Crossing has never existed in HD.
Right, yeah. Because New Leaf was a 3DS game, right?
Yeah, the last home console one was Wii.
Fuck.
It's been a long time. So, like, just seeing it all in HD, it's a really gorgeous game. The colors just fucking fly off the screen. They've got more, like, wind effects through the trees and stuff. So it's really beautiful. I will have to post a video of this. I went to my brother's island last night. We did the online, and when you do online, you go to this little airport, and it's the Dodo Airport, which their tagline is "We can't fly, but we'll get you there anyway," or something like that.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's these dodos, and the animation when like he's working, like getting you online and stuff, is he's typing away at his computer, but of course he just has these like wing hands, and so it's just him going and like mashing his hands and like sweating a little bit. Like it is the funniest fucking animation. I just was howling with laughter watching this, so I recorded it. I'll have to put that up somewhere. But it's, if like, at this point, if you like Animal Crossing, and if you like Animal Crossing, you should probably be playing New Horizons.
Cool.
It's like the easiest review ever.
Yes,
It's like this is what
Animal
you want.
Crossing is definitely one of those franchises. It's like, you're an Animal Crossing person, you can be confident you're going to really like the next one.
Yeah, and I think this one is for me so far, I like the hook of it and the way it all works better than New Leaf, the 3DS one, which the mayor stuff was fun in that. But I found I got burned out on that one pretty fast. We'll see with New Horizons. But I just, there's things like they finally have a tool wheel, and like inventory management is so much better. It's just like, this feels like an Animal Crossing for 2020, not one that's kind of still maybe stuck a little bit in GameCube era. So that's very nice. And I should say I also finished Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
Cool.
The game barely made it over the finish line with all the technical issues.
Oh, yeah.
I had to restart the game 3 times to get the one of the closing cutscenes to play right.
Oh, jeez.
Because I would go into this was like going, like the spot where like, I'm going into the final encounter, right?
Uh-huh.
And like I would go into the final encounter, and the big villain dude would come in, and the game would freeze, but the sound would continue. And then like 20 seconds later unfreeze, and the sound is 20 seconds out of sync.
It's like you're like stressing me out just describing the like, because it's, anyone who plays enough video games like knows that feeling. We're just like, please don't just explode right now. Please, please, please don't just have some sort of weird technical breakdown.
But I made it through. I beat the game. I 100%ed it. My save file shows 100%, even though the achievements are also super glitched, and I do not have the achievement for beating the game.
Great. So it's not just you don't have the achievement for 100%. You don't have the achievement for just finishing the game normally.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't have the achievement. I have the achievement for beating the final boss, but not for beating the game.
Oh, I love it.
It is so fucking glitched, but it is still one of the best games I've ever played. The ending is it is one of the best video game endings. It is like in that S tier with like Persona 3 for me, of like, that is an all fucking timer video game ending. I love it to death. I highly recommend it. Maybe wait for a patch, but it's a great game.
Yeah.
But I also like maybe not, because we're all at home, and if you need something to play, this is one of the best games out there. So, cool. And if you've got an Xbox, Game Pass, nice and cheap. So
yeah, like the way you're describing some of the technical stuff with Ori, it was making me think of Jedi Fallen Order, which had a lot of similar kind of like, oh, please, like, are you loading the next area? Is that why my guy is just frozen in midair while I'm jumping to go climb on this thing? And it's like, and then it gets there. It is the thing that combined with the news, it is starting to feel like, okay, next gen is happening. Like, next gen stuff is going to happen, because it feels like the games we're getting right now are like just barely making it, barely fitting into the console. Like, obviously you have something like Doom Eternal is incredibly impressive to me because it looks great and runs at 60 fucking perfectly.
I'm playing it on an Xbox One S, and it is rock solid.
Yeah, so you can rely on for like, it's gonna fucking tune their games like incredibly well. Like, I'm really excited. I haven't watched the Digital Foundry breakdown yet because I was afraid for any spoilers because I'm still early in the game. But
once you're about halfway through, there's nothing more, and you should watch it because it is fascinating. They actually got some like assets and stuff from id to go in depth, and like what id did to get this thing running. Like, if GDC were going on, every developer in the world would want to be talking to id, because it is that they got this game is truly one of the most ambitious under the hood of this generation, and it runs at more or less a rock solid 60 on every platform. Is insane.
Yeah, so you have id is just like knocking it out of the park with their tech stuff, because they always do. Like, they're basically best in business with that stuff, and they have been since the 90s, literally. But other than them, it feels like most other studios are really struggling to get things to function properly on these consoles.
I'm really fascinated for the last two Sony games.
Yeah.
Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. Like, are those going to feel well calibrated, or are they going to feel like this will feel finished when we get it on the PS5?
Yeah, I'm curious with that as well. Just like how, because it feels like it's coming in hot and heavy, especially with like all the coronavirus stuff. And like, emphasizes just like everything feels like it's up in the air right now with video game stuff. And it's like, I'm very excited to see how everything falls.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, should we do the news?
Yes. What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Okay, a lot of stuff is going on in the news, but you can go to other podcasts for those, and you should. Yeah. There are lots of great news sources out there. Just don't listen to the president, which I can't believe we have to say. But
I mean, we've been saying it for 4 years now, so it's like I'm used to it.
We're getting
unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the president is a national security threat. I hope we'd never get there, but we are. We are there. Anyway, but you can go listen to the real news elsewhere. We're going to talk about video game news, and I guess we should just foreground this with who knows what is actually going to happen with these consoles and coronavirus.
Yeah, there's a lot that is definitely... I mean, because we're still like in the early phases, because we still haven't seen any games yet, which is when it's going to feel fully real, but even at that point, it is still going to be up in the air whether or not they're really going to come out this fall or not.
Yeah, so I think let's just talk as if the world is kind of normal, because I don't know how else to talk about these. Like, Mark Cerny's presentation didn't interrupt itself every 5 minutes to be like,
yeah,
but our lead designer is
because it was clearly affected by the coronavirus stuff, because it was literally just their GDC talk.
Yes.
And that kind of put this into like a weird space. But to make it clear, also, like, so far, both Microsoft and Sony's messaging has still been consistent that they're going to come out this holiday.
Yes.
So they have not officially said, or even like given an indication that they're thinking about moving it. Like, Cerny implied holiday in his thing, and then Microsoft in their stuff like also implied that they're still targeting holiday.
And Microsoft's still been going full steam ahead, it feels like, in their messaging. So maybe it's just projecting confidence so that their stock doesn't fall or something.
Yeah.
Who knows? But we will see. But let's talk. So the PS5, Mark Cerny gave a hour-long lecture, basically, which was advertised as the road to PS5 and live streamed. We can talk about. It's kind of weird. There's two levels.
There's two pieces to this. One is this as part of Sony's marketing strategy, which I think is disastrous.
Yes.
And there's this as a GDC talk by Mark Cerny talking about the philosophy and like technology behind the PS5, which I think is very fascinating.
Yeah, like I think this is the problem, is that I think overall we can probably agree Sony's overall messaging on the PS5 is bad right now.
Yes, in the sense that it's like they just haven't had, since the last Wired article, which was like late 2019, they've had no consumer-facing messaging. And the GDC talk is not consumer-facing messaging. It was not a marketed statement. It was not massaged. Like, it doesn't feel like it was massaged in any way by a marketing team. I'm sure there are touches here and there that were done, but it feels like generally just like, this is what Mark Cerny wanted to say, and this is just the talk he made that would have been at GDC among 100 plus other talks that would have been happening around the same time. But it got lifted from that context, and because Sony hasn't had anything in front of it giving like a very marketed up consumer friendly messaging around the PS5, this is what we have, and this is technical in such a way that neither of us really understand most of what he was talking about.
No.
The vast majority of people who play video games, the vast majority of people watching that stream had no fucking clue what he was talking about.
And they advertised it as the road to PS5, and the marketing
Which
team...
I'm sure is just what the talk was titled, because it makes sense as the title to a GDC talk where Mark Cerny says, this is the steps we took to developing the PS5, because that's how his talk was framed. Him talking to other developers, him seeing what they needed, and then him walking through, these are the solutions we've come up with for what a next-generation console looks like. It is the road to PS5 from a GDC talk perspective, not from this is like a sexy like press release or commercial or something like that.
So they did not prepare people for what it actually was going to be.
Yeah.
They got us all thinking we were going to be watching... Because Mark Cerny did kind of MC the PS4 launch event.
He did, yes.
But that mixed kind of technical developer talk with consumer facing, like they had... We all remember Drive Crazy. What was it?
Drive Club.
Drive Club.
Drive Club dude just... verbally ejaculating on the cars in front of him.
Right.
Infamous Second Son and Watch Dogs guy both out there. I rewatched a compilation of the best moments from that after the Cerny thing, just out of nostalgia. And some of that, if you haven't watched it in a while, go just type in PS4 announcement conference or whatever, best of, because there's some primo moments that came out of that one.
Absolutely. So this was not that. There were some very confusing things that came out of it. I think it's fair to say we still don't really know what their backwards compatibility plan is.
I think it's just PS4 backwards compatibility is what it feels like to me. That's
not what they're saying.
Okay. I mean, it is what they're saying. They
Okay, Mark, but... Yeah. So, should we get into this now, or should we push...
Yeah, well, go where you want to go.
I'll just say this. So, okay. This was, to me, the most disastrous part of the whole thing, is that Mark Cerny... Because probably I think one of the things, from a consumer-facing point of view, we want to know most is how will backwards compatibility work.
Sure. It's not a huge priority to me, but it is, it's nice.
Yeah, I think people want to be able to put their PS4s on the shelf when the PS5 comes out. That would be really fucking nice. Especially because the other context for all of this is that Xbox has been doing the dramatic inverse of what Sony has been doing. They have been 100% consumer facing. They've had lots of really good messaging. It's really clear. They have shown us a couple of games running on it. They're not new ones, but Gears 5, we have a full tech demo out through Digital Foundry and stuff like that. So there's just a lot more going on that side. And we know, how that's going to work, which is that if you can play it on your Xbox One, you're playing it on your Series X. That's
probably.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be something the Series X does not support Kinect, so I'm sure there's a couple of things like that. But that's basically their promise, and they've been very clear in the communication about that. Of the many sort of, I think, consumer confusing things in the Cerny talk is he was talking about backwards compatibility, and he had this graphic on screen that made no goddamn sense that said PS4, PS4 Pro, PS5, and PS4 Pro and PS4 both said Legacy Mode, and PS5 said Boost Mode. And he said something about, of the top 100 games on PlayStation 4, most of them are going to work on the PS5 at launch, and more will work over time.
So his specific phrasing was that they have tested the top 100 PS4 games by playtime, and most of them work, and we're expecting to have them work at launch, basically.
Yes.
And I think what he was saying, and then what effectively was then later confirmed by... Because the PS blog basically, shortly after Mark Cerny's thing, put out a brief summary, more or less, of what his speech was talking about, mostly just using his language, but without all of it. So they took that last little piece about the 100 PS4 games thing and put that without the context in front of it of these are the ones that we've tested so far, and also without the context that he talked about how it has hardware-based backwards compatibility. That they have programmed in logic into the hardware of the PS5 that replicates the logic of the PS4 and PS4 Pro, so that it is not either software-based emulation, and it's not what the PS3 had, which is separate silicon, which was dedicated. This is the PS1 Emotion Engine or whatever the fuck it was called. Here's the PS2 backwards compatibility, which was then ripped out of the PS3 shortly after launch to make it cheaper. So he said backwards compatibility is in for good because it's programmed into the hardware of the chipset on the PS5. And so with that context, the PS4 Pro Legacy Mode with titles that will be playing at boosted frequencies that will, if they are programmed for it, will have better resolution, more stable frame rate, all that kind of the nice bells and whistles. All of that together was a comprehensive statement that was 10 minutes of his presentation. And then the PS blog put out one sentence from it, and it was the fucking worst sentence to pick. And then gaming outlets ran with that 100. It's going to be 100 games. The 100 most played games will be at launch. And then the PS blog, yesterday or something, put out an updated statement that was basically, we have tested the top 100 games. Most of them work already, and we're dedicated to testing thousands more. leading up to launch.
Okay, but there is still, because I watched the conference, so I was aware of the 10 minutes when we talked about this. I found it fairly confusing in parts because there were a lot of back and forth before that statement came out, there was a lot of back and forth on Twitter between journalists trying to figure out what he meant. Does it mean you can play every PS4 game on it and some will work in boost mode and some won't? Or does it mean every game has to be tested and this will be a process? Because they did say, he said, and the PS blog said, more will be added over time and more will be tested over time.
Yeah.
So we still do not have a clear statement. Is this like Xbox 360 on the Xbox One where games have to be tested and cleared before they can run? Or is it everything can run, but to get the boost mode stuff, some things have to be tested?
So
that has not been said.
So games are going to have to be tested to make sure that they run, which is what it is like for the Xbox Series X as well. Microsoft's just not saying that.
Okay.
So because people tweeted at the Microsoft account, and it's like, can you confirm that every single Xbox One game will run on the Xbox Series X? And they said, we are committed. We've spent 100,000 hours, whatever it was, like testing games, and we're committed to testing games to make sure that they're going to run. And it's the same thing that Sony is saying. It's just they came out first, just saying every single thing will run, because chances are like 99% of games are going to run just fine. You're going to test it, and he's like, yep, this is great. There's going to be that 1% of games that's like, you're going to run into something like what Dark Souls was like on the original PC version, where that game was not designed to be able to run at something higher than 30 frames per second effectively, because some of the game logic was tied into the frame rate, which meant that things like climbing ladders, jumping, like some physics-based stuff, got fucked up if the frame rate was too high, and the frame rate on Dark Souls was totally unlocked. So if you just put a game like Dark Souls and just threw a boost mode at it, put it on a more powerful system, the game wouldn't function properly anymore. You'd have to manually put in a frame rate cap, or if this is not what they would do, like program in to like fix the game logic so that it doesn't have those problems anymore. And that's the situation it's in.
Okay. But I guess my overall point, though, and this is why I wanted to start here, is you shouldn't have to be explaining all that to us. Why hasn't the blog just had a statement clarifying that?
I think that's what their statement was.
It's still confusing.
It's like, I think it's confusing because I think Sony's nervous about saying just like all the games are going to work, because they don't want to run into here's the one game that doesn't work and then people will get upset about it and get sued or something ridiculous.
But I think the Xbox statement is that we're committed to everything working. And at some point they will probably have to put out the list of asterisks.
Yes.
But that's fine. I think people are okay probably with a list of asterisks. It's the way it's been phrased is it sounds like we're building up from something, and I think there's also, this is just something that Sony has been struggling with for a long time. Sony has a god-awful track record with backwards compatibility right now.
Sure,
and I think people are naturally nervous because you have one company, Xbox, that has literally been innovating in this space and leading on that, and one company that has not literally done anything with it for an entire generation. Not a goddamn thing. And so, and has like the current president of the PlayStation brand has made fun of the very idea of backwards compatibility in public. And so I think that's why, like, this is why the overall marketing strategy on the PS5 has been disastrous so far, is it feels like there's no sense to calibrate these different sides together. Mm-hmm. If this is something you have a bad track record on and people are nervous about, then you should just say, we're committed that everything will run. Some things might not, but our engineers are hard at work testing to make sure as much as can runs. That's not that hard to say, and that's a much, much clearer statement than anything we got from Cerny or from the brand. And I don't really blame Cerny for this, because, again, his talk was, even in that part, is on the technical side. It was not a consumer
his focus was about him talking about how they program the logic into the PS5 hardware, and that they need to test it because basically he framed it as like our console's so powerful, we're going to have to make sure that we test it so that things don't break because of how powerful it is. Right,
which, of course, Xbox is having to do too.
Yeah.
But, there's probably a reason why, in their public-facing statements, Xbox doesn't say that. Because it's confusing, and, like, the average consumer not only doesn't need to know that, but it's probably better that they don't know that, because it just raises inevitable questions. Mm-hmm. And, I wrote a post on my newsletter about this that, I think probably I wouldn't write it the same way if I had all the information I had now, but like based on what seemed to be out there and some of the clarifications we were getting on day one, just felt like, Jesus Christ, this is such a headache. Why is this so confusing? And I think that's kind of what the whole thing feels like right now, because there are obviously some really exciting things going on under the hood of the PlayStation 5. But boy howdy, we're in the middle of March now, and that's so buried under everything else. And it's, I have not heard anyone from, like, other than Mark Cerny, if you speak the speak and can get it.
Yeah.
I have not heard anyone from Sony deliver those messages. I've had to hear it through journalists and journalists doing interviews with developers and things like that. And like, they shouldn't have to be doing the work. I mean, this is really right now kind of a tale of two marketing strategies, where Xbox, I think, is abundantly clear on all this, and it's a really good overall marketing move, and Sony is not. And it's not too late. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying the PlayStation 5 is going to bomb, but it's a little conspicuous that Sony had ceded so much space to Xbox through the first 3 months of 2020. And it's conspicuous now that they decided to fill some of the space. And like, even if Sony was going to do this and have the GDC talk, why as the marketing division are you not creating like a package around it that would be more like the kind of stuff Xbox has done, that can go out to a consumer-facing side? Because right now, there is an obvious void that is filling with oxygen that Sony doesn't control. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and the problem is it's just Sony's not in control of its own message. Like, it just feels like... It feels like there was supposed to be an event that didn't happen. And I don't know if that's true. Like it wouldn't shock me if there was going to be some sort of event, because we talked about this last week, and that it got canceled quietly because of coronavirus related stuff. Since it would have been, Sony's based in Japan. But even if that's the case, you needed to do something. Like, you can't have the technical GDC talk be the first major piece of information we hear about the PS5 since the Wired article that talked about, like,
which was also pretty technical and like is more a hobbyist thing than a...
But that was based because that was like, hey, here is the advantages that you will have from like this SSD approach, which is like the main stuff they talked about. And then there was like a little bit about like the 3D audio in there that like was like, oh, and we can use some of this stuff for audio stuff, and then you find out, oh, that's actually something that's really important to what they're trying to do. I also find it interesting that like the claims from that original Wired article about them having an SSD that is much faster than anything that is currently available on the PC market is actually true, because I think everyone looked at that and was like, yeah, sure, and it's like, oh shit, okay, no,
Sony put their money where their mouth is
for realsies though.
It's wild.
But that stuff was all contextualized as like, and then when you're playing Spider-Man, you won't have to load a thing, and it's like, and your speed won't be stopped by the speed at which it streams in the city. Like, all of it was contextualized in a way for consumers using stuff that they already know. And that's not what this GDC talk did, because it's a GDC talk. It's not designed for consumers. And Sony needed something in front of it so that this didn't have the pressure on it that it had.
Here's an obvious one. The only footage we have of the Spider-Man thing is shaky hand cam footage from in the theater. Why is there not a video from Sony on YouTube right now demoing that?
Yeah.
Again, Xbox did a similar thing with Gears 5. They did it with Digital Foundry, who are very good at communicating this stuff. You can go watch it right now. Why does Sony not have that? That would be the easiest thing in the world, because they've done it.
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't exist. It's a first-party game. They own the studio. Maybe you have to clear something with Marvel, but like, why would that be bad to remarket this successful game? Like, or a different game if you want to do it. I'm sure Horizon Zero Dawn will have cool shit. That's what's confusing. And I think even if they had a big event canceled, Xbox has not done a big event with this, and they've done a very good job in they've done their blog posts, and they've done outreach to outlets, and like, I think one of the smartest things they've done was they just gave the fucking box to Digital Foundry and told them to play with it.
Yeah.
And if you haven't watched those videos, they're fascinating. And it wasn't just Digital Foundry. Some other tech people got it. And, it's this great... It's kind of the sweet spot you want to be at right now in March 2020, where Digital Foundry are very in-depth technical people. It's sort of a hobbyist audience.
Yeah.
But it is also a consumer focused, because they are gamers, and they're going to... Everything they say they're going to tie back to, and in this game you could get something like this. Or they're very good at communicating it. Like, honestly, if the Cerny talk confused you, Digital Foundry did a recap video where they explain it in a much more consumer-friendly sense.
Yes.
But it wasn't it's not like Sony gave them a PS5 to play with the way Xbox
No, I
did.
mean, they did have... Because they basically got the Cerny talk before he gave... So they had like an interview with Cerny where they talked through the stuff beforehand. So you get a little bit more information because of that. But they didn't... I mean, because we don't know what the box looks like. I suspect Sony probably has not even finalized the form factor of what the case looks like. Because Microsoft showed that off like super early. Like usually consoles are
December year before,
Yeah, you don't know what a console looks like until like 5-6 months before, because usually that's like an E3 thing that happens.
Yeah, for the last gen, we did see the Xbox One at their reveal, but their reveal was May, so it was right before E3, and then Sony was at E3.
Yeah.
Where didn't Mark Cerny come out holding it like above
I think
his
so,
head?
something like that. Yeah,
it was because I think it was like the head. It was like Sean Layden or someone was like, and now Mark Cerny to show off the masterpiece design they've come up with, and he comes out holding it above his head like it's the Holy Grail.
I mean that E3 is the like. That is the E3 where Sony just like publicly pantsed Microsoft because of how disastrous it was. They just like came like Mark Cerny might as well came up galloping on a fucking white stallion, holding the PS4 aloft with like a big like cardboard sign saying it will play used games.
Yes.
You know.
Well, they did that fucking ad thing that was but you know. So let's talk about the specs, because this is what's one of the, I think Jason Schreier at Kotaku, who we wind up mentioning every week, but he's
like
good at this.
one of the best in business around game journalism.
And he had a good, I think, take on this, which is that like if you want to like to summarize Sony's disastrous rollout of this, there's no better example than them putting out this spec sheet that to the unassuming eye looks worse than the Series X, and not adequately communicating that their big advantage is this SSD that you don't really see the value of on a spec sheet.
Yes, So if you just look at the spec sheet, because this is just like, this is just what always happens where people like, they'll pick, marketing will determine, here is the metric that is going to become the thing that people talk about.
Bits.
And yes, in the Xbox One X marketing shifted the conversation into teraflops. Before that, I had never heard anybody fucking talk about teraflops. Like, it would, it probably was mentioned as like, and the PS4 is like 6 teraflops, whatever it was. Like, I'm sure it gets thrown in as here's one of the multiple metrics that tell you how powerful a piece of hardware is going to be. But the Xbox One X was the like, this is the most powerful console ever made, and it's 8 whatever fucking teraflops.
I think it was 8.
Yeah, like 8 teraflops. It's like, oh my god, so many teraflops, guys. 8 teraflops. And
it really is analogous back in the day to the bit wars.
Yes.
Like post, because you had the 8-bit and 16-bit consoles, and then after that people just, and that was a very clear 8 versus 16, you could see it.
Yes.
And then after that it got all fucking muddled.
Yeah, then there's like some people like Sega's like 32X, man, 32 bits. And like it's like, I guess that's nice. I think the Atari Jaguar was a 32-bit console.
Though the Atari Jaguar is the best one because it was a 64-bit console that was really 2 32-bit processors that was impossible to develop for. And so they literally did these like fucking gymnastics to get it to 64 to beat the N64 to market. And it made no difference because then no one could develop for the Jaguar. So like...
it was the Atari Jaguar.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'm going to go through the specs really quick here because I have them in front of me. Because the picture that this paints really, I think we can agree, Sean, is these are both super powerful consoles.
Yes.
They're very future-proofed. The differences are things we're not really going to know until they're out in the world.
Yeah, and most of the differences are very, very thin.
Yes. So, let's go through. So, the CPU, they are both using 8 Zen 2 cores. The PS5 is clocked at 3.5 gigahertz at a variable frequency, and the Xbox Series X is the same thing. 8X Zen 2 cores clocked at 3.8, but it is 3.6 with SMT. I don't know what SMT is.
I don't remember.
Anyway.
Like it's it basically at the end of the story, like Xbox Series X has like a slightly beefier CPU.
Yeah,
but they're both use the same basic architecture, so they'll have the same suite of features.
Yes, my understanding is that the Series X is aiming for higher clocks, and the PS5 is aiming for more variable clocks.
Yeah, which we'll talk about the variable frequency stuff once we get through the specs.
Okay. Teraflops, the PS5 is 10.28 teraflops, and the Xbox Series X is 12.16 teraflops. The important thing here more is how they're doing CUs. So the PS5 has 36 CUs clocked at 2.23 gigahertz, again, variable frequency. The Xbox Series X has more CUs. It has 52, but at 1.825 gigahertz. Again, that's one of those things that, like, that'll come out in the wash. They are different approaches to reaching basically similar power specs.
Yeah, they're very close. And again, it's the Series X definitely has the beefier GPU. Like, it's got a lot more compute units, which helps it hit that higher teraflop number. That also might make it a little bit better at ray tracing, though I think that's one of those things that we just don't actually know. Right. Practical application in, like, complex games, how that's going to really work.
I think the important thing to say is neither of them are, like, cutting costs on any of these. They're just different architectural approaches.
Yeah, these are also much more powerful relative to the current PC landscape than the PS4 and Xbox One were, like, by a significant amount.
Yes, this is a huge jump. Both of them use custom RDNA 2 for GPU architecture. Both of them have 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory. The PS5 has a consistent memory bandwidth of 448 gigabytes per second. The Xbox Series X, 10 of those gigabytes are at 560, and they're higher, and those are going to be completely given to games. 6 gigabytes are at 336 gigabytes per second, and some of those are to the UI. Some are to the to game developers. Presumably, there's a split in the PS5. Also, we just don't know what it is. The internal storage. This is the big difference, but we'll table that for a second. Both of them are custom NVMe SSDs. One of them is more customized than the other.
Yeah.
The Xbox Series X will launch with a terabyte of space inside. The PS5 will be 825 gigabytes. We can talk about that later. The I/O throughput, which is basically the speed of that SSD, is the big difference here. For the Xbox Series X, it's 2.4 gigabytes per second raw and 4.8 compressed. For the PS5, it's 5.5 raw and 8 to 9 compressed. The SSD is very, very fast. Expandable storage. Let's table that because I do want to talk about expandable storage. It's different for both of them. They both support USB hard drives. Which you can either back, and they've both, I think, said you can back up your PS5 and Series X games, just not play them from there.
Yes, but backwards compatible games you'll be able to play through the USB hard drive.
Yes, or on the internal SSD if you want. They both have 4K UHD Blu-ray drives. They are both HDMI 2.1. That's one thing we did not know about the PS5 yet, and that's great. 2.1 is very future-proofed. It's not even in most televisions yet, so that's really, really good.
Yeah.
And then backwards compatibility, Xbox is everything Xbox does, which is some Xbox, some 360, all Xbox One. Backwards compatibility is PS4, probably a little confused. So that's the basic specs and stuff. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start at, like, maybe just talk about the fucking SSD, which is the big...
Let's start with the CPU, GPU stuff, just because I think that's faster to get through. Because the broad narrative, and I think is really interesting, of, like, the two different approaches, again, very generally speaking, is that the Xbox Series X is, like, a really beefy PC, basically, that's, like, really well sort of honed and optimized and designed and put into a nice, convenient package. But it is more of a sort of, like, natural extension of the exact same, like, sort of philosophy behind making a console that we have had with the Xbox One in PS4 generation. It's just more powerful. With, like, the exception being the SSD is an important addition that will, like, change a lot of things about how games are made. Hopefully, like, it should. But
it certainly means load times next generation will not be much of a thing.
Yes, and more, and there will be lots of other possibilities and things opened up with game design around that. But generally speaking, the Xbox Series X is what you've gotten, just better. The PS5 is more... It feels like slightly more old school console design philosophy in the sense of, and this is what Cerny talked about, is a balance between evolutionary design and revolutionary design. In that the Series X doesn't feel like it has much in what you can call, like, revolutionary design points, other than sort of the SSD. But the PS5 is not necessarily as beefy in a lot of areas, but it's taken a different approach in terms of how it deals with, like, power, which is what leads to the variable frequencies of the clock speeds. So basically, one thing that they're doing with the PS5 is, instead of sort of, like, throttling or amping up the power based on, like, the draw that the game needs, which is what causes, like, if you're playing God of War or Horizon Zero Dawn on your PS4 and you hear, like, those fans really kick in, that happens because it's drawing more power because the game is doing something that demands more power. And so to avoid that problem and prevent the, like, hurricane fan thing and like heating issues and all that kind of stuff. Instead, they're going to have like a consistent power draw. And when you run into a situation like that where a game, for whatever reason, and sometimes, again, and he talks about this, which I think was good in his talk, it's like it's not always the things you expect. Oftentimes, it's like more simple stuff that because it's simple, for a variety of reasons, it causes a bigger power draw. So like the map in Horizon Zero Dawn was a big one. Anytime you went to the map, like you just heard the fans kick on. Control is the exact same way. Every time you brought up the map in that game, the game would start to hitch. The power would kick on. You'd hear the fans going. So when you get a game that runs into that situation, instead of it like kicking up the power and kicking up the fans to deal with the increased heat, they're going to have a consistent power draw, be the same thermals effectively, so that they know exactly how hot the console is ever going to run. It's never going to run hotter than this, because it just physically can't. Instead, they will throttle either the CPU or the GPU depending on what the game designer wants. And basically he's saying the clock speeds that they put into the tech specs are what it's going to hit most of the time, which is for the GPU faster than what the Xbox Series X does, which is why the teraflop number is not as huge a difference as it might otherwise be, because they're basically like the teraflops are more efficient in a way because the GPU is at a faster clock for the PS5. But that means that basically it will throttle the CPU or the GPU a little bit depending on what it needs. And basically Cerny's pitch of it is that you only need a very minor downclock to get a huge gain in what would be like your effectively make up that power difference. So it would be like a couple of percentage points lower in your CPU or GPU clock would equal like a 10% boost in what you would have been like the power draw in the old console design philosophy. And that seems really cool. If you look at the Digital Foundry video, like most stuff is not designed like this, and it's Sony trying to take a different approach to it, which seems fucking cool. Like I'm not super technically minded, and I don't think anyone knows exactly what the full advantages or disadvantages of this approach are going to be, because it's not variable clock speeds the way that people normally think about them. They're not like overclocking the console. It's not that kind of stuff. It's a very sort of custom design approach. But that's a cool pitch, at least for what they're doing with the CPU and GPU, that is very distinct from Microsoft's approach, which is very traditional, and they want like a bunch of overhead. So in fact, like their GPU is probably slightly underclocked from what it could be, just to make sure that they don't run into like power draw issues. They don't have to like worry about thermals and stuff. Which is what most consoles have done historically, is had this like what the PS4 and Xbox One had, were like slightly underclocked CPUs and GPUs.
The Switch famously is, because the Switch, if you were okay killing the battery in about 10 minutes, can do a lot more. You can actually run The Witcher at like medium PC settings, but you will just fry the fucking console. But people have done this because you can homebrew the Switch and overclock it.
And in like the ideal circumstances, your Switch could probably run like that and it would mostly be fine. But if, you're playing in a really hot environment, it would, or if it's like you're putting like the Switch is like doesn't have a lot of like space for the fans to dissipate heat, then it's going to fry, right? So like consoles leave a lot of overhead for that kind of stuff to make sure they don't destroy themselves, or sometimes they don't, like the Xbox 360, because that's one of the big things with the Xbox 360 was it basically melted itself. That's where you got the red ring of death,
which we all fondly remember.
Yeah, what great times. So the advantages of that approach seem both to be it allows them to hit a higher clock speed, specifically the GPU, than what they normally would expect to, and again, like ideally, we'll see how this works in practice. But it sounds really appealing of that it means that they don't have this moving power target figure that they have to hit and like account for with their like thermals and like the heating on the console and like dissipating the heat, which means if this works out well, that would mean that you're not going to have the problem of the PS4 and PS4 Pro that it gets very, very loud, right?
Yes.
Which Microsoft with the S and the X, like this is one of like the main things that they like have pushed really hard, is like, hey, we like did some really rad shit with our cooling systems, and so these consoles are super like whisper quiet, and that's great.
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention that because I like that Mark Cerny was kind of self-effacing about it, because the PS4 is famously loud. I mean, I I thought with my PS4 launch model, I thought something was wrong with it. It got so loud. And I even I think I sent it in for testing because I was like, this is not right. And it depended on the unit a little bit too.
Yes.
But like my PS4 Pro sounds like a fucking jet hangar at times. It's crazy. And I have an Xbox One S now, and that thing, the only thing you can hear is the hard disk spinning a little bit if you're close to it. And I don't know how you would eliminate that sound. So like everything else, like fucking whisper quiet. Even when Ori was clearly killing that system, it doesn't even get hot to the touch. So like that's really cool, and I like that Sony is saying, we can fix that. Yeah. Like let's do something about that. It's very cool. If you're interested in Microsoft's thermal solutions, we know more about them because of the Digital Foundry video where they literally build the console.
Yeah.
And it's very cool. That whole tower design is in part to facilitate cooling.
Yes.
And it's a really neat design. And I'm curious because the PS5, Sony didn't talk about this, but reports are that they have a pretty innovative cooling system idea too, and this is part of it. But like,
yeah, I did like that piece of like Sony said, like basically said it's like, and we're saving the like cooling system for the breakdown that we'll do at a later date. But I think you'll all be very excited by what we've come up with. And he had a little like, 'cause that's one thing to also see because we haven't talked about it. I fucking love Mark Cerny.
Oh, he's great.
So much. Anytime I get to hear him talk about stuff, it makes me so happy because he's so quietly enthused about everything he says, and he's so confident about everything he talks about, and it's just like, so when he gives his little smirk and he's like, and I think you will all be very satisfied with what we've come up with, and it's just like, I'm pretty sure I will, Mark Cerny, thank you. It's just like, it makes me very happy every time I hear him
it's
talk.
like that's the moment where anyone else would be much more braggadocious in a marketing speak.
Yeah,
he would be like that's Mark Cerny saying we've made the quietest system ever. You know,
yes.
but he would never say it like that, right?
Yeah, he's just got this very like quiet confidence to him that
I think the hashtag Cerny ASMR was trending during and it is like that's an unintentional ASMR video.
Yeah, it just feels like it's like his natural like intonation and speaking volume like is just that. Like it does never like if you just see like normal interviews with him, he talks the exact same way. So it's like it just seems that's who that dude is.
What makes me feel bad about Sony's whole rollout of this, because I think if this had been properly contextual, and it's not all Sony's fault because GDC didn't happen.
Yeah.
But like if it had been properly contextualized, where this was the developer talk, and we had the bigger package that we talked about outside of it, I think like you could fully realize how good what Cerny did was. And I think that's been sold a little short because he suddenly had something on his shoulders that he shouldn't have to have.
Yeah, that speech was not designed to handle.
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's very good at what he does, obviously. Yeah, so do you want to talk about the SSD now?
Now is the time to talk about the SSD, because this is the thing about the PS5 that is extremely exciting, especially if you like Sony first-party games, because obviously like any differences between these consoles are already marginal. Like one thing to understand about like the different teraflop stuff is that like yes, like probably the Xbox Series X games will like if there are frame rate dips, they'll maybe be slightly smaller on the Series X, or maybe a PS5 game might run at checkerboarded 4K and the Series X would run at native 4K. Although even that the difference probably is not actually enough to account for that, because to put into context, the difference in terms of like the theoretical power of the CPUs and GPUs on the Series X and PS5 are like it's quite a bit smaller than the difference between the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X,
which has gotten really big over time.
Yeah, but it's even smaller than the difference between the base Xbox One and base PS4,
right?
Which was not a considerable power difference. It was like some games ran at like 1080p, some ran at like 900p.
Yeah, I think Doom Eternal right now, for instance, is 900 on base Xbox, and 1080 on base PS4.
Yeah, so it's a smaller difference in terms of like the relative scale as that. So it's like it may look like a bigger difference, but that's mostly because like if you have two consoles that are both like, here's one console is 10 teraflops and one console is 11 teraflops, that 1 teraflop distance difference is a lot less meaningful than a console that is 1 teraflop and a console that is 2. That 1 teraflop distance is massive. It's a twice powerful console, right? Instead of like a 10% more powerful. So that's why like that difference, there'll probably be things that you can see in the Digital Foundry breakdown that will be different, but it's not going to be huge.
It's not going to be like one game is going to run disastrously on one console.
No,
that's not what we're looking at.
No, yes, this is like a smaller difference in terms of like theoretical power than almost any other like simultaneous console launch. So it's not a big difference there. The only like the major deciding factor between the two in terms of their console hardware which again, this is probably not going to have a huge impact on third-party games, but might have a huge impact on Sony first-party, is their custom SSD has a theoretical throughput that is twice as much as Microsoft's. With like the raw throughput's like 5 gigabytes per second or something, right?
Yep. 5 versus literally twice, because Xbox's is 2.4, PS5's is 5.5. Both are faster than anything that's ever been in a console.
No,
and
again, we're talking about like what do we have right now? It's like 100 fucking megabytes per second. Like it's like nothing. Because we're running on hard disk drives, right?
Yep. And Xbox's is still customized. It's not the same as just taking an off the shelf SSD and plugging it in, which does not get you a ton. This is very fast. But yes, PlayStation 5's is very fucking fast. It is a fucking beast.
Yeah, and this is like, I think if you follow some game developers on Twitter and they've been tweeting excitedly about the PS5, the main thing they're excited about is this, because this feels like old school console. Holy shit. Like, there might be SSDs that will be theoretically this fast on the market when the PS5 comes out. Maybe. But even then, they won't be optimized in such a way to reduce bottlenecks, which, like, I feel like probably like half the fucking talk was certainly talking about this SSD because of how important it was to them, and all the like custom silicon they put into the hardware to minimize bottle caps, to maximize the efficiency of the SSD. Like, he talked about how the SSD allows for 6 different basically levels of priority for data compared to the 2 that a normal SSD would have on a PC. And all that kind of stuff. So it's a heavily customized, lightning fucking fast SSD that is like the cornerstone of, seems like, the console design, because he kind of opened up the talk with it and spent most of the talk.
It's clearly they started here and built out from there.
Yeah, and it's just this feeling of like, oh, like this console is trying to do something like legitimately that has never been done yet in video games. Which, to be fair, like Microsoft is doing the same thing. Like, again, the SSD advantages you're going to get on the Xbox Series X will give us games that could not like physically have been designed on the Xbox One or PS4. Not in terms of like the resolution or the frame rate would take dips. In terms of like the character would stop moving every 2 seconds because the hard drive couldn't stream in data fast enough, right? Like, ideally, what this means. And Cerny did one thing I love that Cerny did is because he worked on the Jak and Daxter series with Naughty Dog, he showed a top-down view of a map from Jak 2 and showed how it's like it has all these weird winding pathways and weird corridors and stuff that are basically built-in busy time for players to allow streaming in of data ahead of time. And this is how games are still designed today. Like, every single game you ever play, that you run into like a thing where it's like, oh, this character's like skimming through like this very narrow passageway that causes him to walk very slowly. That's not there because the designers are like, this is going to make this section of gameplay so exciting, guys. What if we slowed down their speed to 10% and had these like animations where they're very like deliberately stepping over these rocks and going under underhangs? Or let's have a character sort of, it's just like a game where you could have co-op or it's just AI, and let's have you like crouch down near this big wall and hold your hands down here, and the other character runs up, puts their foot on their hand, and you jump up, and that character very slowly puts their hand down, and you jump up and grab the hand and get pulled over the ledge. Those things are not put into video games because game designers just love people vaulting over walls slowly. It's because you need to put in some sort of stopgap that allows you to stream in data so that you're not hitting a loading screen every 10, 12 minutes that you're playing the game. An SSD, and like an SSD that's like mandated. So it's like every game is going to be able to program knowing this SSD exists, which is a situation the PC does not have.
And it's important to note, both consoles, you cannot run their native games on something else. It has to be on their custom SSDs or approved storage. So like, when you say it's mandated, it really is. You can't just plug in an off-the-shelf SSD and it'll run off that.
Yeah, you need to make sure that you have something that has the memory throughput to be able to stream the data that these games need. And so that theoretically has like a huge series of knock-on effects to every single aspect of game design. That includes level design because you can stream in data faster. It includes like textures and stuff because I thought there was an interesting comment I saw of someone talking about, again, there's another game developer thing of like the importance of the SSD is, and this is something Cerny also addressed, was that it allows you to be much more kind of dynamic with how you use your RAM because before you would have to put a bunch of like kind of junk data into your RAM because you didn't know where the player was going or what they're going to do. So you would need to sort of anticipate the next potential 30 seconds, whatever it was, of gameplay, and load that into your RAM so that, like, if this character model or weapon model or whatever is going to be, like, used in the next 30 seconds, maybe, it needs to be there accessible on the RAM. Whereas if you have this really fast SSD on the PS5 or the Series X, that means that instead of it being the next 30 seconds, it's like the next 2 seconds of gameplay. And that just frees up a huge amount of memory for, instead of seeing, like, 3 of the same repeated car model driving down the street in GTA, you know, how, like, one way to get the car you want to spawn, if you're trying to spawn a specific car in GTA, is to be driving that car, because that's one of the models that is accessible in the RAM. Because it's only going to be able to load in so many different kinds of models and have them visible at the same time and load them into memory. With the SSD, that's not going to be as much of a problem. You'll be able to have a lot more variety of different objects and textures and things on screen, have them be higher resolution than they otherwise would be. And then obviously, like, loading screens don't become much of a thing. Your speed is not throttled, which that for Spider-Man 2 is going to be so... I'm very excited for that, to see what that means for the traversal in that game. And then, like, it's also exciting to think about just, like, the wacky shit you could do of, like, teleportation. That is, like, that's a thing that's, like, you have to very specifically, like Portal, design your game around it and make sure you have very contained small boxes that you can teleport within, so that you're not, like, destroying the game's memory because you're trying to load in, like, 2 very distant sections of the level at the same time. Whereas, like, theoretically, teleportation could be a thing that is, like, a more accessible ability in games that you could play around with more because you can stream in data.
One thing Cerny talked about is fast travel becoming actually fast, and his specific joke was Spider-Man won't have to be on the train anymore because of the famous animation in Spider-Man where Spider-Man's sitting on the train, which I like Spider-Man sitting on the train. I would miss that a little bit, but...
Because this is, like, designers have been in this situation that they have had to come up with all these weird things, like elevator rides in Mass Effect, like jokes in your fucking, like, hints or tooltips and loading screens to, like, try to deal with fast travel, like, games like, you know, just having played Doom 2016 and playing Doom Eternal, like, if you could just instantly respawn, oh my god, I would love it so much. Like From Software games are also going to benefit hugely from this, of just, like, being able to get right back in there immediately, and being able to do that in games that are really complicated, because, you know, there are some games that are really good about that, but this stuff like Celeste or Super Meat Boy that are very hard, but are very simple graphically, so that, like, you know, you die in Celeste, your character respawns the instant that you die, and you just get to try it again, right? More complicated, like, graphically and sort of geographically or geometrically games will be able to take advantage of that kind of stuff. And the fact that Sony's pushing so hard that it's not just, here's a, like, really, really great SSD. Here's an SSD that you cannot currently buy an SSD that has the theoretical throughput that this has, let alone all these sort of custom hardware they put in to optimize it as to be as efficient as it possibly can be. That makes me, like, coupled with the skill of Sony first-party development, the thing that Sony needs to do, the thing I need to see, that I just am so curious and, like, so fascinated to see what this is going to look like. Because theoretically, Horizon Zero Dawn 2, or whatever it will be called, the next Guerrilla Studios game, is going to be whatever their launch title or, like, marquee. That's what they're looking for if it's launch or in the launch window. What does it look like when Guerrilla can go from running off of this slow hard drive to the fastest fucking, like, SSD that you can think of? What does that studio, which is, like, famously one of the most technically accomplished studios in the business, what the fuck did they come up with? That is a very exciting prospect.
The one that is most exciting to me, Sean, is God of War 2.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever the next God of War is. Because remember, God of War 2017, was that it?
I think so,
yeah. The God of War 4.
18, maybe?
God of 4. That one, it has sections in that like, other developers didn't know how they pulled off. Like, the one-shot falling down,
from the mountain
areas.
on the dragon all the way into the portal through to, like, hell or whatever. Yes. Yeah.
Stuff like that. But, like, because that whole game technically is one extended shot, but imagine if they don't have to do the sections where, like, they keep the one-shot illusion alive by having you walk through a door and go through a little spectral realm, waiting for it to load, and then go through the next door, which is a really eloquent way to do that. They won't have to do that anymore.
Yes.
So, like, because God of War, I think we can all agree, is one of, if not the most ambitious games of this console generation. I really want to see what that one team does when, like, the technology, like, is actually bigger than maybe their own ambition, instead of the other way around.
Yeah, where you could have... I mean, because then you can just have shit that's, like, Superman ridiculous bullshit of like punching people through mountains and having them not be like ridiculous cartoon mountains or something that's like, you know, the textures have to be this like flat shade or something. Like you could just have really graphically complicated looking games that where you can move through the environment at extreme speeds. Like that's so enticing. It just makes me so much more excited for this generation of consoles, this upcoming generation. Both, again, like these are benefits you're going to see on the Series X as well. It's just going to be more pronounced. Like you're probably going to have faster load times on the PS5 because it has more overhead on its SSD and stuff like that. And I'll be curious to see if maybe like once you get deeper into the generation and people are sort of like developers are, because you know developers will fill up the technical space that you give them, which is why this is not going to mean that all these games are going to run at 60 frames per second, because everything else about the games are going to get more complicated. So eventually, developers are going to figure out ways to fill up the technical space they've been given. So one thing I am curious about is if this difference will be something that's noticeable 4 years from now, when people are like, oh, now that it has, like this PS4 version of the game literally has no load, or PS5 version has literally no load screens. The Xbox Series X has like a brief load screen that's like 3 seconds long or something. I'll be curious to see if that difference becomes notable over time or not.
Yeah.
But it's Sony's pitch and Microsoft's pitch for the Series X just makes me feel so energized about the next generation of video games, because it feels like this generation was very good because games are good. But like the hardware didn't make any big mistakes. Well, you know, Xbox One's messaging and stuff early on with the Kinect, once Phil Spencer took over, it didn't make any like big mistakes. Once you have like the Xbox One S and the X, that's just like, but it's very much like more of the same. Like they're better versions of the 360 and PS3 in terms of the player experience.
It very much felt like this was Gen 7. It was like Gen 6 Part 2.
Yes.
And like down to, I think a lot of us would say the generational dividing line happened somewhere near the end of the 360 era, not during the PS4 era.
Yeah.
Like Last of Us was clearly one of the first games of this generation. Dark Souls was clearly one of the first games of this generation, even though they launched on last-gen hardware. It feels like that generational dividing line will be starker this time somehow.
Yes. That at least looking at the tech is so much more exciting. And it, again, like this all comes with the caveat of we have no idea what this is going to look like, practically speaking. There might be some like fatal flaw in the PS5's like variable frequency thing that like nobody has seen before or something. Or similar to the Series X, maybe their like cooling solution works great in a lab, and then all of a sudden you get a lot of those things out into the market and it's Red Ring Part 2. Like we have no idea. I don't think that's going to happen for either of these. I'm pretty optimistic about both these platforms.
I think Phil Spencer would skin people alive or something like that.
It's like he forces E3 to come back just so he can just like fucking Game of Thrones style just shame people publicly on stage. Like he just wills it into existence.
I just wonder, like, the Xbox team has to be so hyper aware of that for like ever now, you know?
Yeah, it was such a massive snafu. But again, so it's like there are obviously like caveats because this is still so early in the reveal. We haven't seen a proper next gen game. Like we got a trailer for Hellblade. We know that Halo Infinite will also release on the Series X, but it's also going to be on the Xbox One.
I'm so fascinated in Halo Infinite because, like, I wonder if it's just going to be a sort of current gen title that runs really nice on Series X, or if it's going to be an Ori and the Will of the Wisp situation on Xbox One S. I feel like either one is possible.
I like, my gut feeling is that I don't think, and I think this is true for Sony first party as well, is I don't feel like the proper first party titles are going to like sacrifice their like PS4 Xbox One versions. Right. I think Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us Part 2 are going to be technically totally sound. But those developers do that. Same thing with 343. Like they're very good at that. But like the one thing with Halo Infinite is that you're not going to be able to feel the full benefit of that SSD. Like you will have like really fast load times and stuff like that. But they're not going to be able to adjust the geometry of the game design to account for that SSD. So that's why like we need that proper demo. That's why, like, you know, who knows what the situations internally might be very different and makes this impossible. But the way that Sony rolled out the PS4, with me watching that like highlight reel from that event, which was February 2013, they handled that so well because it wasn't just like, here's one like short trailer. it was multiple game demos that they showed and trailers. Like, there was an extended trailer with playable game sequence of Killzone Shadowfall, which was indicative of what that game looked like when it actually came out, which was like jaw-droppingly gorgeous when you watched it in 2013. And that game was jaw-droppingly gorgeous. It just, had like maybe 3 good levels in it, and the other ones were fine, with like one really bad level near the end. But they had this like material to show off about the PS4, and Microsoft has at least shown like these like updated versions of existing games, but like looking at the Digital Foundry breakdown of the Gears of War 5, it was like technically interesting, but at the end of the day, it was like, this is a really nice looking version of this game, which is what you would get if you ran it on a really nice PC right now. It wasn't like, here's this great pitch for the next generation. And I feel like Cerny made this great pitch in terms of the tech. I need to see the software.
Yes.
And I'm guessing we'll see that in June, around the time that E3 would have happened. At least certainly for Microsoft, I imagine that's where they've projected that sort of, here's like an in-depth game demo of Halo Infinite.
They were definitely going to do it there, because they always do big stuff at E3.
Yeah. And I imagine Sony's probably targeting sometime around then, both in terms of, that just makes sense because things will have to have started being more finalized in terms of form factor and all that kind of stuff once you're like 5 months away from the release of the console as opposed to 8 months away from the release of the console. But yeah, like I think it's going to be a lot of like sitting on pins and needles until we actually get to see the video games running, which is when one
other thing I want to talk about though, is expandable storage.
Oh right, yeah, this is also very interesting
because so the PS5 is at a disadvantage in terms of how much storage is in there. It has 175 gigabytes less, which is probably 2 or 3 games, 1 or 2. We'll see with the sizes, but Xbox definitely an advantage there. It's small. That's like a fifth of the drive. I mean, that's not nothing. For expandable storage, Xbox's pitch is actually very simple. There will be custom expansion cards they're making in with Seagate.
Yes.
And there are these little cards that go into a custom port on the back of the console, and they are basically versions of what is running inside the Xbox, and you will buy those. And it's actually, the Digital Foundry video shows it's kind of cool how there's like different platings on them for the cooling system. But you plug that in, they're going to be a terabyte each, and they just expand your storage. Very, very easy.
Yeah. And theoretically in the future, there might be 2 terabyte cards, whatever.
Probably going to be pricey because they're custom, but the benefit is that's really very clear to consumers. And you will not have to do anything special. You're just going to plug it in. And it's not going to be like the big drives you have now on your consoles that are kind of ugly sitting on the side, ungainly. This is a tiny little thing going in the back. Some people were comparing this to the PS Vita memory cards. That's stupid. That's nothing like this. PS Vita didn't even fucking have memory inside it.
Yeah.
Xbox is giving you a terabyte. If you want another terabyte, you can do this. I don't think it's going to be like that. Also, at the price level that the PS Vita memory cards were, if you if you exponentialized that out, this would be like a $2,000 card, which I don't think it's going to be.
I mean, you should probably anticipate it'd be like $200. It's going to be expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it will also be for the PS5 because So yes, it will be expensive, but not. All I'm saying is not to the level of like. The PS Vita was like $60 for 4 gigabytes.
They gouged you pretty fucking hard on that.
I don't think it's going to be that level of... Again, if it was that level of gouging, it would be like $2,000. The PS5 solution is different. They have an NVMe SSD slot, and you will be able to use off-the-shelf components, but it has to be certain ones. Sony will have to clear them because theirs is so customized, it's going to have a certain level of throughput. Those drives currently do not exist. We're not sure when they're going to exist. And as Digital Foundry pointed out in their video, the problem is a lot of those kinds of drives come with things like heat sinks and other sort of custom PC components that not only can you not use on the PS5, but would make them incompatible. And those would also be presumably, these would be, by the time the PS5 launches or even a year out, cutting, bleeding edge, state-of-the-art, brand new tech. Also going to be very new. Sony's going to have to clear them individually. I kind of wish Sony had some kind of solution like what Xbox has, because it's just, on the Xbox side, it's going to be so clear and there's not going to be that stress around it. Both are going to be expensive expansion solutions. There's just not going to be any way around it. I think Microsoft's seems like the more elegant one to me, but to be fair to Sony, what they have going on inside is more ambitious, so maybe that level of elegance isn't possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would be, because, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Sony could just sell, like, in as a stopgap for the market to catch up, just sell SSDs that fit that form factor and do that. Like, they haven't said they would. I'm not necessarily expecting that they will, but, like, it is a possibility. If the market is not there to provide those SSDs when the PS5 launches. Because it is like, they're two different approaches that have like two different advantages. And it's almost like a Mac PC kind of split in terms of like, or like Apple, Microsoft, or Apple Windows, let's say.
Because the Microsoft is on the Apple side here.
Yeah, because so Xbox's approach is very Apple-esque in that it's like simple, it's straightforward, like foolproof, like you don't have to worry about it, you just buy the fucking thing, slot it in there, you're good. It's very like simple. You'll almost certainly be paying a premium on it because they will be the only people making these.
Yes, but another advantage is probably on a UI level is it'll be able to just unify that and tell you like 2 terabytes, here it all is, instead of probably having to break it out.
I don't think that's so, because I mean, what Sony's approach is almost identical to what they did with the PS4.
Yeah,
they have an empty bay inside the form factor of the PS5 that has a slot for these SSDs that again are like brand new kinds of SSDs. So like that market is not totally sort of like finished, kind of like it's standardizing everything yet. But so they have this empty bay, and that's why like it'll be a little bit more technically involved than the PS4 version, just because there will probably be a wider variety of different kinds of SSDs out there that would not physically fit into the bay. But it's the same kind of thing with like the PS4. If you wanted to expand your internal memory on the PS4, you would be looking it up anyways. Be like, is this a type of laptop drive that will work okay? Okay, awesome. Let me buy that. So it'll be the kind of thing where you go to a Sony source or you like YouTube it, whatever. There'll be lots of people that will tell you this is the best one to buy. Kotaku will have like 5 articles on the day the PS5 comes out of it. Here's all the different whatever.
Right.
Like people are gonna take care of that for you. But yeah, so it will have that. It'll mean that I assume, like with the PS4, it's not going to be like a hugely involved process, but it'll be more than just sliding in a card. You'll have to like slide a panel back, unscrew like a screw, lift up a thing, slot it in, screw back in, put the panel back on top, which is what the PS4 version is. It's simple, but it does require you to have like some basic know-how and like a little bit more like, I don't know what's the word for it? Like you have to be more active, or like willing, proactive to go out and like do this for yourself. The advantages being that it opens it up to the market. So that means that you would have a wider variety of different kinds of drives, a wider variety of different like places you could go to get whatever kind of SSD you want. And so theoretically, there would be, as long as there are people, like companies out there manufacturing SSDs that fit into this form factor, you could get whatever memory size you'd want. If you wanted to go like buck fucking wild in 3 years from now, get something that's an even faster SSD than what the PS5 has, you will be able to do that, and it will have those kinds of advantages. So you'll have more freedom at the cost of the like convenience of the Microsoft solution.
Because the only thing I want to point out about this is that so when this generation launched, the last generation, at the beginning how it worked is Xbox One had no internal expansion, which is still true actually, but you could just plug in any hard drive and you were good to go.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as it wasn't super old or something. But you plug in an off-the-shelf hard drive, you're good to go. And the PS4 had no external drives. They added that much later, but you could do the internal expansion. And I remember, Sean, on the podcast, you and I both thought the internal thing was better. We liked that
I still
more.
think the internal thing is better.
Sure.
I mean, I should also make it clear, like, I use a Windows laptop. Like, I would much rather have the ability to slot like whatever I want into that slot as long as it like physically fits and is at the sufficient memory throughput. Like that is like I like having that freedom, and I'm fine with like going through the technical process of installing.
Yes, but I remember you and I said that, but I heard from listeners, I heard from people in real life. I heard, not that listeners aren't in real life, but I heard people in daily life, and I read lots of articles. People hated that about the PS4. They did not like having to expand it. They did not like that they couldn't just plug a drive in. I think because it was a couple levels. It was like I think a lot of people just liked the simplicity of going on Amazon, saying 1 terabyte hard drive, you get your Seagate or your Western Digital, whatever it is, and you plugged it into your Xbox One, and you were done. And a lot of people just don't like opening up their systems. They don't like having to do they don't like having to do the research there. Over time, that also got harder on the PS4 because the size of laptop drive that goes in there. I just remember when I did this on my PS4 Pro, they're not manufactured in the same numbers anymore because like time went on, you know. And I remember there were a lot of people who hated that. And when Sony this was after the PS4 Pro launch, but it was like halfway through the generation, added the ability to use just external HDDs. There were people like fucking acting like they were celebrating in the streets about that. I remember the articles celebrating it, again hearing from listeners, and people really happy about that. And I remember being like, but you could add it internally, and I didn't really get it. And I had people comment to me directly, and I read articles to this effect, being like, but I don't want to do that. That's confusing. I'm scared to open up my console. I want to just be able to put it in the back. And so that's all I'm saying is that I'm not saying Sony's solution is necessarily bad, but I'm saying from a consumer standpoint, they have way more of an uphill climb there than Xbox does.
Yeah, like, I just don't know if that's, like, that meaningful. Like, I just feel like that's never going to be a thing that, like, someone's going to choose to buy an Xbox Series X over a PS5 because of that difference, you know? So
Probably
I think from Sony's perspective, like I think, like, the, like, hardcore enthusiast is much more likely to be satisfied with, like, because I was much more satisfied with, let me just open up the PS4, drop in whatever drive I want to buy, then I don't have to, because one, it's just going to be faster than having to go through the USB port, and then in terms of, like, the speed of the memory, right?
Yeah.
Just having it be internal, and then I don't have the fucking USB thing just hanging around somewhere inconveniently. So so I think that's probably their perspective, is it's more convenient that way for, like, the hardcore enthusiast. It appeals to them. What I am also going to say is that I think for everybody, I think we should all just be investing in high capacity external hard drives, or like you did, like repurposing one that you already have and plugging that in and doing that, because that's going to be so much fucking cheaper than buying like an extra terabyte or whatever of memory. Like, really think about how many games you need. Like, you absolutely need to have actively installed, accessible from the SSD at any given time. If it's more than, like, 8 games, I don't know how you're living your life that you're switching between games that frequently. Like, my plan in this would be, I'm, like, right now I'm still planning just getting a PS5 because, for a variety of reasons. But, like, if Series X convinced me and Microsoft convinced me to jump ship and get an Xbox Series X, I still would not be planning on buying one of those memory cards. I'd just be like, no, I'm fine with if, like, I decide in the future I wanted to replay Doom Eternal or something, and I had deleted it because it's probably 100 fucking gigabytes or whatever. I would move that off to a hard drive, and so instead of having to just re-download everything, it'll take some time, but to just transfer that memory off that hard drive into the internal SSD, I think that for most people, that's just going to be the thing you want to do, and it's going to save you a shit ton of money.
I completely agree with you on that. Yeah. One thing Sony will have to figure out if that's the case is they need to get a UI that can do this stuff fast. The PS4
they've got a SSD that does 5 gigabytes per second.
I get that. Like, yeah. The PS5 copying data, moving it between drives, it's so... I don't know what... They made a change at some point. I read an article about this where they, like... It's not just downloading, but the copying data thing it does just takes for goddamn ever.
I mean, Cerny literally talked about that in his thing. That it's like, because that's part of that is having to delete and then, like, reinstall large amounts of data, and then you're deleting extra data off of it.
Okay.
Just because, like, it's not super well optimized, but it's also just the way that hard HDDs work.
But Xbox was never this slow. I've used both very regularly, and Xbox is much better at all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, Microsoft just never surfaces, like, they never tell you when they're installing something. It just installs in the background and puts that in as, like, whatever the normal percentage bar is, right? It never surfaces this, like, extra copying, deleting, uploading, or, like, updating.
I guess it doesn't. I mean, it does tell you the data transfer rates, though, on the Xbox UI directly, and it's generally much faster. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
So I think that's not going to be something you need to worry about on either console, just
Probably
because
not,
the SSD... Like, physically, the SSD is not going to have that problem. Okay. Like, it doesn't have to write data in, like, a bunch of different places because it's just one block.
Yeah.
So it is able to update, and patches should be able to update, or after you download it, installing the patch, that should take a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
Just physically.
All right, so yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway here is each one has strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, but
and
the strengths and weaknesses are not hugely disparate. At least, certainly not in ways that would manifest much in third-party games. The biggest
Certainly
question mark
there, yeah.
is for if the faster SSD on the Sony drive or for the Sony machine, if that will manifest in very obvious ways in first-party games. That's the thing that would be the only huge difference I could even envision.
Yes. So, as you said, Sean, it's exciting. I think Sony is falling flat on their face in terms of rolling this thing out, but they've clearly got a great machine, and hopefully they can scrub that up and get back to... Because they're in a rough spot versus Xbox right now in the messaging. I hope they can get better because it's pretty clear I think they have a system worth selling, and I know they're good at the game side of it and all that. You don't have to worry. They're not going to, shutter Naughty Dog or something. That would I probably would not buy a PS5 if they suddenly shut down Naughty Dog. But yeah. So we will see. Gird your wallets now because these things are going to be fucking expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, 500 minimum, right? I mean, there's no way.
Almost certainly. Yeah.
So
unless one of them just wants to take a ridiculous loss, like $100 loss on their console.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're looking at $500.
We'll see. I don't know. Who knows how desperate Xbox is?
Yeah.
Maybe Xbox is you can have it for free if you give us a nice review on Yelp. I know that wouldn't even be relevant, but I feel like people are always asking to write reviews on Yelp. So there you go. All right. This has been long so far, but there's still more podcasts to go. We will now be switching over to a discussion that was on this week's episode of Weekly Suit Gundam, where we talk about the End of Evangelion.
The movie, The End of Evangelion.
Yes.
Again, it's episode 25 and 26, but not that episode in 25 and 26. It's episode 25 apostrophe, episode 26 apostrophe. Those End of Evangelions.
Let's do it. So recap to people really quick. Last time on Weekly Suit Gundam, or Weekly Genesis Evangelion, as we're calling it for these two episodes, we talked about the TV series Neon Genesis Evangelion, watching 1 through 26, and that was just the TV broadcast versions where famously 1 through 24 tell a story, and then 25 and 26 do something completely different and do not resolve that story in any way, shape, or form, except sort of on an emotional level with one character, Shinji. But
Congratulations.
25 and 26, totally different. And so we were left very unresolved, a little frustrated, maybe even kind of sexually frustrated, we might say, because the movie End of Evangelion we're about to talk about deals with that an awful fucking lot. Anyway, so we were left a little frustrated, as were people in Japan at the time, because after the end of the TV series, Neon Genesis Evangelion had become a big hit, even though the studio ran out of money producing it. They got a lot of that money back because the show was a huge hit, merchandised up the wazoo.
Yep.
And so they made 2 movies, one of which was called Neon Genesis Evangelion Death and Rebirth, which is the first hour and 10 minutes is a recap not a recap in the style of most recap movies, but a recap of the TV show, and then had a rebirth section, which was basically 20 minutes of new animation that was the beginning of the End of Evangelion, so kind of like a preview of what was coming next. And then the movie The End of Evangelion, which is very literally a replacement of episodes 25 and 26. It fashions itself that way in the film, and I think it's important to remember, in the broadcast version of episode 24, 24 ends with a preview, the next episode preview of an episode called Air. The episode called Air never aired.
Yeah.
Episode 25 was different than what was promised in that preview, so the first half of the End of Evangelion movie is called Air, and is basically the episode they were going to make before they ran out of money.
It's heavily based on the script that they had already written before they realized, we can't animate this script, let's do something different. What if we just used the same animation we already had, and then had a cartoon drawing of Shinji in a white void? Yes.
So that's what they did. But now we have the movie The End of Evangelion. That's what we're going to talk about. I do want to mention, I watched the Death and Rebirth movie.
I have not.
Okay. And I should say, this is where it gets confusing. Death and Rebirth, you can't really go watch easily now. I'm sure you could pirate it.
Yeah, because they've been recut, that compilation movie, whatever you call it, has been recut and re-aired and redone 4 or 5 different times, and I've never been able to keep straight what the fuck that movie is.
The definitive version now, it's what's on Netflix, it's what's in all the international packages, is called Death, parentheses, True, end parentheses, Squared. So it's Death True Squared, and it is the...
Which is where Kingdom Hearts got all of its naming conventions from. I think it's just from Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Pretty much. And what it is it's the death portion of Death and Rebirth. My understanding is that they did, like, in the Laserdisc, because Death, that part of it does add some new animation, and some of that was recut into episodes 21 through 4 in their director's cut versions, which is what's on Netflix, it's what's on the DVDs.
Yes.
Although there's additional new animation that's not in those episodes. So the Death True Squared version is they've taken out the Rebirth part, because that was just a preview of End of Evangelion, and I think they made a couple little tweaks to that, but it is the recap portion of it. And one of our listeners recommended I watch it because I said I liked the clip show in the main TV series.
Uh-huh.
And I second that recommendation. I think if you're going to watch End of Evangelion and you haven't, for instance, seen the show in a while, which for me, I took 2 weeks off and then watched it, it was very helpful, gets you back up to speed, but it is a Hideaki Anno recap special, which means it's all over the place. Like, it starts with the death of Kaworu, and like it goes, well, it starts and ends, kind of. That's like the framing device, because that's the event that immediately precipitates End of Evangelion, and it goes all over the place in time. It's sort of done character by character, and there's a framing device where all the characters are coming into an orchestra hall, and like Shinji, because this is a character detail about Shinji, is that he played the cello as a kid. So he's playing cello. I think Misato plays viola. I know Asuka is first violin because she thinks she's the best. You know, that
I think
sort of
Misato
thing.
should just play an electric bass guitar, and like it doesn't fit with the rest of the ensemble, but she doesn't give a shit.
But like as they come in, so Shinji starts with the cello, and he plays, I think, he plays something on the cello, like Bach, and then, you know, then there's cello and violin, and each section of the movie starts with a little orchestral thing, and then the initial montage of that section is scored to classical music. It's very well constructed. It basically takes all the best animated bits from the show and puts it in there. It's entertaining to watch. I very much enjoyed it. Some of the new animation is cool. And they basically do the entire sequence from the end of episode 24 with Kaworu and him doing Beethoven's Fifth Ode to Joy while he goes down. And that is one of the best directed sequences in anime I've ever seen. It's so good, they just play those whole 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Still is. I know I was a little down on Evangelion in different ways. I need to stress how fucking amazing that sequence is. Everyone always focuses on the episode 18, 19 sequences, and those are great. But I think that sequence where Kaworu reveals he's an angel, goes down, hijacks Unit 2, and then Shinji grabs him, and I will stand the full 60 seconds of footage with him just staring down Kaworu while the music plays. They do it a couple times in the home stretch of Evangelion because they're running out of money.
Yeah.
That is the one that works for me. And then
I
cutting
think
to
it's
black
like
when it squeezes.
It's just too long for me.
Probably, yes.
It's just too long to make it feel like it's not there on purpose, and when it feels like it's not there on purpose, it doesn't work.
But it is, in the movie, they do it in full again.
Yeah.
It's fucking great. But yes, that is the death portion of Death and Rebirth. But obviously the main attraction is End of Evangelion.
Yeah. And this is where I have to say that I had originally been planning to rewatch the End of Evangelion since it was only one movie. Like, I was not going to rewatch all Neon Genesis Evangelion because I had just rewatched it over the summer when it came out on Netflix. I did not, because we are also recording this 1 week later than we originally planned to, because the coronavirus stuff hit big, and I don't like End of Evangelion that much, and the specific ways I don't like End of Evangelion really made me not want to watch it with all the stress around COVID-19. So I was like, I've seen it recently enough that I don't need to rewatch it. I can talk about it just fine. So I think I probably said I would have rewatched it on the last episode. I didn't rewatch it, but I watched it like 5 months ago or something. So it's fresh enough in mind for me to talk about it.
Well, this is going to be weird, Sean. I liked it.
Okay, I thought there might be a chance you would, because it's very avant-garde would be the nice way to say it. Up its own ass would be the less nice way to say it.
Oh, it's 100% up its own ass.
It's
but
very it's like when I watched the End of Evangelion, I understood why Metal Gear Solid 2 is the way that it is what I'm saying, right?
So here's the thing. I didn't like it in the sense of like, my life has been changed. I bow at the altar of Eva. I'm pricing out the Japanese Blu-ray box. I'm not doing it. By the way, the Japanese Blu-ray box is like $600.
Yeah. Now, there's a reason why it's a big deal that Netflix got Eva, because it was hard to watch wherever you were in the world.
Yes. So, you know, it does not suddenly like change my entire perspective on the series, but I will say this. If the way I had watched the show had been 1 through 24, Kaworu gets squished, and then I did End of Eva as 25 and 26. And then maybe I watched the original 25 and 26 as a supplement. I would have been quite a bit more positive on Evangelion last week. Because whether it's a good or a bad ending, it is an actual ending.
Sure,
and it is a climax that like follows up on Asuka's in the hospital depressed. Where do we go with her? You know, Misato has this. I actually like the Asuka stuff in this movie.
I was saying, where do we go with her immediately?
Okay, I know. Yeah. We'll get to that scene.
Yeah,
I was thinking more of the scene where she comes back and has a really cool action scene.
Yeah.
That's more what I meant. Not she has a sex crime committed against her while she's unconscious. Ava gonna Ava.
Sure, I feel like End of Eva really Ava's in some places.
In End of Eva's,
they get some shit in this movie that you wouldn't have been able to air on TV.
The first 2 minutes. But anyway, you get that. You get a wrap up to certain characters like Misato. Some are better than others. I kind of like Misato's resolution. I think is better than some of the other women in the movie because she kind of gets to go out on her own terms versus some of the other characters. But it is a very clear, like, there are all these plot threads in particularly like 20 to 24 have a lot of plot threads introduced about the Human Instrumentality Project and SEAL and what they're up to and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and obviously Gendo's up to something, and Shinji's mother has something to do with the Eva, and obviously you get Kaworu there and the Last Angel comes in, and there are all these plot threads that I didn't love Eva the TV show, but I did like the second half quite a bit more than the first half, and I did get invested in some of this stuff. And obviously, 25 and 26 don't do anything with that stuff. Yeah. Like, if you've seen End of Eva, you can interpret 25 and 26 as being a version of those events, but just watching the TV series, for me, there's no way to do that. That's
you have just from the TV series, you have absolutely no context for what human instrumentality means, so you don't understand that it's supposed to be this, like, it culminates in the thing that all mecha shows culminate into for some reason, which is some sort of weird talk about, like, psychic gestalts of human consciousnesses, whether it's Gundam, this, Ideon, that, and Neon Genesis Evangelion. I don't know why mecha shows like to do this. They really like this concept.
Yes.
But you don't have any context for it in the TV show, so you don't have any sense of, that's what this weird psychic space is supposed to be an expression of what the Human Instrumentality Project in Third Impact actually is, whereas the movie has a lot of that stuff, but it sets up that stuff is a direct consequence of the Third Impact and weird super naked Rey and all that kind of stuff.
Like whatever you think of End of Evangelion, it is an ending. Like it takes all that stuff. It very much feels like the episodes they would have made if they had the time and money. It is. That it even says, this is episode 25. It has both the Japanese and English title. It has the act break. It has credits
like
in the
a
middle.
mid-credit sequence, like it's a fucking video game.
Yep, it's all there, and you can I actually watched it in two halves. I watched it as episode 25 credits, took a break, had dinner, came back 26, and it works totally fine in that way. I'm almost surprised it isn't just broken up and shown that way on the DVDs with like the original 25 and 26 as like a fun extra because it's so clearly. Again, regardless of what you think of each one, it's so clearly this is the ending they meant to do.
Yeah.
But on a bigger scale than they ever could have done on television.
Oh yeah, much more elaborate animation. Like it is, because I don't love this movie much, but it is a very impressive animated film.
It's one of the most spectacular pieces of animated cinema I've ever seen. I mean, it's wild. It is incredibly well directed. It really feels like all the best parts on a production level from Eva the TV show cranked up to 11. Like if the big scenes in episodes 18 and 19, like the Eva going wild and Eden shit, or the big Kaworu sequence I was talking about where he goes buck wild and below nerve and all that. If that's the kind of stuff in Eva you liked, I think it's obvious you would like End of Eva. And for me, those were the parts of Eva I resonated with the most.
Yeah.
And I would say End of Eva resonated with me similarly. And I also think, for what it's worth, I don't think Eva in any form that I've seen, I haven't seen the new movies yet, obviously, because they're not finished yet, but in any form, it does not seem like something to me, and I think this is fair, you think this as well, that is super sure of what it wants to be.
Oh, absolutely
right?
Not. No. Yeah, I think in particular, like, Shinji is like a distinctly different character to me in End of Eva than he is in the TV show.
No, totally. But I thought End of Eva kind of focuses in on... It feels like it has more of a coherent sense of identity to me than the show does as a whole. And part of that is it's an 80-minute movie. It's easier to have a coherent sense of identity. But, like, it has Dispatched with all the high school stuff at this point. It has Dispatched with the sex comedy. There's still sex politics we can talk about, but it's a different sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just not laughing about it anymore.
No. It has Dispatched with... It's not even trying to be a mecha show at this point because it's much more of a Lovecraftian monster sort of thing. It's almost more of a kaiju thing in this movie, I think. It goes avant-garde in a way that feels very purposeful to me. Like, again, maybe up its own ass purposeful, but purposeful not like we ran out of money, we're going to do this. It's very... And I find it impressive in that regard. It feels like... I don't know if I want to say it's the best of what Eva has to offer. It feels like the purest expression of what Eva wanted and was trying to be. And I think... Because I don't even know how much, like if you ask me to, like, grade this on a scale of, like, by giving this movie an A, B, C, D, or F, I don't know what the fuck I'd say. If you asked me to detail all the things, like, I really liked about it and what I got out of it, I'm not even sure I could do that after one viewing. I just think, like, having been somewhat invested in Eva, because I watched 26 episodes isn't nothing. It's a good invest, like 10 hours of time. We did a podcast on it. I was somewhat invested. This felt like closure to me and to a pretty spectacular level at times. And I was surprised. There were things in this movie that moved me more than I would have expected to, given my tenuous connection at best to some of the characters in the show. So overall, like, I guess the highest praise I can give it is I came out of End of Eva understanding why Eva has the fan base it has.
Sure, yeah.
Much clearer than I did out of the TV show. So, for what it's worth, that's where I kind of come down on it.
Yeah, for me, I think it's... there's stuff about End of Eva that I think is spectacular. Like, I think the second half where they go full ridiculous avant-garde, it is, like, truly visually spectacular. I think there are lots of interesting ideas in that sequence. And then I also think, like, the Asuka, like, the action sequence with Asuka is very good, even if I don't love how all that stuff really culminates for that character. I don't find satisfying or agreeable in many ways, but it is what it is. Ava's going to Ava in that sense. So some of those, like, individual moments I like a lot. I like the production. I like the look of it. I like the editing. For me, it is, and I think this is maybe true of what you're saying, that, like, it feels like maybe the truest expression of what Ava's trying to express, and at the end of the day, I don't like what Ava's trying to express. And I think it is a thing, and this is the reason why I didn't want to watch this movie, is I find End of Eva like a particularly, like, hateful and spiteful kind of movie. I think it's a movie that hates itself. I think it's a movie that hates its creators. I think it's a movie that hates its characters. It's a movie that hates its story. It's a movie that hates the people that are watching it, and it doesn't have anything on the other side of any of that hate. It just kind of hates, and I think it hates in a way that to me is usually not very interesting, because it also is talking to you constantly. And the thing that kills the second half of, like, the avant-garde stuff is that it never shuts the fuck up. And that is like the MGS2 part of some of this stuff would be, like, the visual storytelling would be very appealing to me if it let it be purely more visual, and instead the characters are, there's either, like, fictional, like, sort of, like, you know, platonic sort of aristocratic dialogues going on in a weird way in his psyche, or it's a lot of imagery that is happening with characters narrating over the imagery, and it just kind of feels like watching a David Lynch movie like Mulholland Drive, and David Lynch is sitting next to you in your ear just whispering, and this is the part where it becomes a dream, but over there it's not a dream, this is what this means, this is what that means. It's like, you don't need any of that. You can just let a lot of what you're doing try to stand on its own, and I think it would be easier for me to give a more, like, giving interpretation to the movie if the movie gave me more space to do that. But because the movie's constantly narrating at me, like, it never allows me to sort of, like, fully invest in some of the more interesting visual things that the movie tries to do, which ultimately kind of killed the experience for me.
That's fair. I did not find that to be as much of a problem. I think there are, like, having just watched it last night, there are parts, particularly with some of the, like, I don't even know how to describe these images, but the global stuff where big naked Rey is, like, consuming the earth, and she has vagina hands that are, I mean, I couldn't be more explicit. I mean, literally has a clitoris in parts. I mean, it's there, like, you know, and it's the world is being sucked in and stuff, where some of it is just pure music and visuals. But yes, there's a lot of the sort of a more elaborate version of the photo montage we get in episodes 25 and 26. Yeah. Not the new episodes 25 and 26, but the original episodes.
The original
25 and 26.
TV airing of the End of Evangelion, not the movie version
Of the End of Evangelion.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I think that's interesting, this idea of it being hateful. It is definitely a very dark movie. It is definitely... It has some nihilism in parts. I mean, it does... This is tough, because I think in some ways it does come to the same conclusion that the episodes do.
Sort of.
But then it does have this tag at the end that I read about a little bit, and I take this as a controversial scene among the fandom, because where it ends is this scene where they're back sort of on Earth, reconstituted somewhat, and Shinji and Asuka are back in their bodies, and he's strangling her, and then he breaks down crying, and she says, what's the words in Japanese?
Kimochi wari.
Yeah, which can be interpreted a couple different ways, but it's like, this is disgusting.
Yeah, it's like I always say it's nauseating is kind of like I feel like the way she's saying it has that sort of like implication to it.
Yeah, and that tag colors things a certain amount, because without it, the movie sort of traces, and this is actually where I like 25 and 26, the original episodes, quite a bit more with the context of End of Eva, because those do sort of happen in End of Eva, and you could slot them right in, and like, having watched them, I know where they're happening, which is when everyone becomes the goo, and Shinji is confronting this idea, and it's this big allegory about depression of a world completely without, it's a very Freudian psychoanalysis idea of retreating to a space where there is no distinction between self and the world, and the difficulty in having that. And it kind of, and in a more compressed time frame in the movie than in the 50 minutes between those two episodes, coming to the realization he doesn't want to be in that world, and the world reconstituting around him a little bit. So there is sort of a theoretically hopeful arc there, but it does have this down note in its tag. So I don't know. I don't even know fully how to read it, other than this combined with episodes 25 and 26, the original episodes, felt emotionally right to me as the conclusion to this story. And when I say emotionally right, it doesn't necessarily even mean I like or approve of it, but it does feel like because when I say this feels like the purest version of Evangelion, that means it has the things I genuinely like about Eva, amped up to 11, and the things I genuinely don't like. Yeah. We'll talk about the opening scene of this movie in Asuka's bedroom, or her hospital room. Yeah. That is 100% pure Eva. But that doesn't mean I like it. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, and I think part of where like my feelings on it come from is also it. And this is like a frustration I have with a lot of Neon Genesis Evangelion in particular, but it is such like an insular feeling thing. Like, it feels like it's so... Like, the movie feels like self-centered or like self-absorbed in this weird way.
Yeah.
Which like, and it like legitimately like feels like it's a teenager. Like, it legitimately feels like it's you have not thought about like other people being other people is like a thing to you. And it's like there's like an ego and an obsessiveness with it that I don't think is particularly intentional. It just feels like the movie just can't see things outside of its own scope, which is part of that feeling of like the movie doesn't know how to give, like, to me, like a great amount of texture to like the experience of depression, because it only knows like this one note, and when it tries to deviate from that note, it has to like get back to it, which is why Shinji like if you track Shinji's like character development, it is really bizarre, because it feels like he's sort of zigzagging all over the place along this like weird frequency, like to get back to this place in End of Evangelion where he is like laconic and just refuses to do anything until Misato promises to fuck him, which then gives it as like, okay, I guess I'll get into the Eva now, because now we're back onto some Freud shit. Now I'll get into the Eva.
I mean, he's fully aware she's dead.
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated than that,
yeah.
But I see what you mean.
Yeah, but it is this like he goes from having because remember, he has already gone through almost literally this exact experience in the TV show where he was dissolved inside of the Eva, and he decides life is worth living, and he reconstitutes himself.
Yes.
And it is just the show. Once it gets to that point, the show can't fathom what to do with the character that has like come to grips with something.
Well, and it's the third time, because episode 4 is him going fully comatose, and then being convinced because the people who... And that's the one that fully works for me, because it's all in the real world, and what it is that kind of brings him back is the people at school who, like, beat him up become his friends, and he starts to have... And it's a thread I wish the show did better, because it pays off in the fight in episode 18 when one of those friends is the fourth children.
Yes, the fourth
children. And he winds up, having to kill him through Gendo's intervention. And I think if that friendship aspect had been more finely sketched in the intervening episodes, it would be even more powerful, and End of Evil would have more to trade on there. But, so it does it then. It does it when he literally becomes the primordial goo in episode 19, and then it does it again here. So,
and if you watch the full TV show, it does it in a vague way in 25 and 26 in the TV show, and then does it again in the movie.
Yeah,
and I could see an argument for it's about how depression is not something you get over, but there's no space there to actually have told that story. And if people want, like, for me, like, what is my benchmark for an animated story that does, like, depression stuff really well, Welcome to the NHK is my favorite that deals with that subject matter. And that is one that shows this clear, like, progression of how it's so difficult for this character to try to sort of escape this spiral he's in, and when he does for a little bit, oftentimes he falls back in, but the whole story is scoped around that concept instead of trying to jam it in at the end, if that's what Eva's trying to do. And I don't really think that's what it's trying to say. I think it's more just like it feels like it didn't know how it wanted to end itself until finally it gets the movie, and then it kind of knows how it wants to end itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets tough to talk about, because there's so much in this that is obviously non-literal and is either completely symbolic or allegorical. Like the movie still has, just like the TV version of the ending, does ultimately move to a place of sort of unreality and fourth wall breaking, and there is a general insularity to Evangelion that is very much in this movie. I agree with you on that, and sometimes I think it's expressed in interesting ways, and sometimes I think it's expressed in very uninteresting ways. Generally, though, like, I kind of thought this movie, and I don't know even how to account for it with, obviously there is something that is repetitive to it in that Shinji has done this multiple times. Yeah. Shinji's arc is not like Amuro's in Gundam. Amuro does not desert 7 times and go through it. Like, Amuro deserts and then gets over it, and then he grows as a character.
Amuro deserts again.
Yes, they don't do that.
It's a great episode.
Yeah. He's a very different character than that. But I think, like, I guess as an overall piece of art, the movie End of Evangelion worked for me most powerfully on the level of sort of this maximalist visual expression of not just a depression, but kind of a... Because there's something about Eva, this movie, that feels a little more aware of its teenager insulated self than the TV show is, in that it is this giant maximalist visual allegory about insularity in and of itself and depressed states, and it feels a little bit in some ways at points like Lars von Trier's Melancholia, which I think is still probably the best cinematic depiction of depression I've seen, in terms of making it literally about the end of the world and trying to instill in you the feelings of what clinical depression is. I think that movie, I'm not a Lars von Trier fan, I think that movie's a masterpiece, though, and it's like the best of him. And there's something in this movie that's kind of similar in that it is this, the first half is completely Shinji comatose, sitting on the sidelines, refusing to engage while the world ends around him. And I think we can both agree it is a spectacular presentation of the end of the world. It's very strikingly directed, and people are dying, and it's gory as hell, and it is all sound and fury. And then being awoken to that, and then in the second half becoming a different kind of maximalist visual allegory where it moves into the avant-garde space. And I think it works in ways that I could not even put down on paper. If you told me to write about this movie, I'd say fuck you. I don't think this is a movie I can put to words. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because generally I pride myself on, I am a film scholar. I hope I can write about every movie I see. I don't quite, as you can probably hear right here in kind of this halting way, part of it is having only seen the movie once last night, and it is a lot of movie in those 85 minutes. But that is something that, to me, kind of does work about the movie, and I find Shinji... I don't know if I ever find Shinji compelling as a character, but as the totem that he is in this movie, and very explicitly becomes an audience avatar, because there is a fourth wall breaking section near the end that is a call and response to the audience and is about the act of watching anime and escaping into anime that I actually found very interesting in weird ways, because I think this show having its otaku roots and kind of coming back around to that and being about that very explicitly, weirdly makes the up its own ass about it more genuine to me, because it has that call in that avant-garde way. But that's the overall register the movie worked for me in, I think, and the way, sort of like in 25 and 26, the episodes do this more explicitly, but the movie sort of makes every character a different aspect of Shinji's psyche in that way. So yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's sort of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think for me, where I wish the movie had this sense of, like, I think it's hard for it to feel like it's like legitimately exploring or doing something, for me, very interesting with the metaphorical or allegorical exploration of this sort of insularity, without it being able to either acknowledge, express, or even like recognize that there are things outside of that insularity in a way. Like, it just feels like there's no, and this is some of the problem with the TV show as well. Like, I think it's part of the problem with, like, you never hit a point in EVA where I feel like there's like a solid boundary. Like, there's like a floor to stand on. Like, it's just so porous and vague. Whether it's with the world building, it's with the character development, it's with the plot details, it's with the metaphors, it's with the intention of like the sexuality in the show. All those things just feel so muddled. And here, like, there's something vaguely interesting about the way that like muddle becomes like visually represented in what literally happens in the story. And but without it sort of having this sense that the people making it recognize things that exist beyond what this movie's expressing, and that's what it never feels like. It never feels like there is something here that's like, this movie actually understands that what it is portraying is something that is so purely toxic and is like self-destructive, and it's like the movie just can't kind of like express anything or acknowledge anything outside of it. Like, and like, you're having difficulties talking about it, I'm having difficulties talking about like what, like, the feeling that I feel like this movie's not able to comprehend in a weird way.
Let's start with something simple here, though, that I know I think in agreement on and is more concrete. I think 100% the things this movie does well would work better if the other characters felt more concrete.
Yes.
And
if it felt like
internal.
there was a meaningful distinction between the Misato that exists in the real world and the Misato that exists in Shinji's head, if that was like something I could be confident on because the characters were distinct, that would be great. But the characters are not, and especially in this movie, the movie feels like it's like mostly follows on from what they were in the TV show, but not exactly. And so the movie versions of characters like Shinji and Asuka and Misato feel like slight deviations from what they were in the TV show. And so it's my grasp on who these people actually are is even more tenuous than it used to be.
Because I think if Misato, Asuka, Rei, Katsuragi is Misato. Who's the other woman in the lab? Ritsuko. If basically the female cast of EVA felt more like human beings, were people fully, there would be a lot more to build on here. And what makes me a little bummed is that I feel like they're getting there with some of the characters here at the end. Not 100% ever, but I feel like there's like with like Misato has some really good stuff in this movie when she is like, because I mean all of Misato's best stuff tends to be when she's in command as like the military captain ordering other people around, and there's a lot of good stuff with that in this movie as Seal is like invading and everything, and she's having to make those tough decisions. And there's a lot of the Misato I really do like from the show, and it feels like, God, maybe after a full TV series and a movie, they're getting there, but this is the end, and so you can't make it all up, right? Yeah. When Asuka is thrown in the EVA, and she has this internal dialogue that goes from I want to die to I want to live and fight, and then she has this incredible battle and is awesome and a badass and is like living up to her best self. I'm like, this is something with Asuka I think they were building to in the show, and there was some compelling stuff there, and never got it 100%, and it's not 100% in this movie either. But God, they're on a path. There's some of that with some of these characters.
Yeah, but I feel like for every step forward they make one or two steps backwards.
They do
in this movie as well.
It's two problems. It's a little of too little, too late.
Yeah,
and it's a problem of two steps forward, one step back. Should we just tear off the Band-Aid and talk about the first scene of this movie?
Yeah, because I will say this, because when I said earlier that like one of my main takeaways and like one of the reasons why I just don't like this movie is it feels very hateful to me, and one of the main ways is that I would not use the word misogynistic to describe most media, because misogyny, it, like there's being sexist and there's having like sexist stereotypes, there's objectifying women, like that's one thing. Being misogynistic, which is hating women, that's something that like I reserve that word for things that I think are like truly, this is misogynistic. This has like something out for women. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, the TV show, I think flits between being sexist and misogynistic. This movie feels full on misogynistic to me. I think it like actively hates and wants to destroy every female character it has.
And there's a couple ways to discuss that.
Yeah.
Because I guess the way I would break it down is I don't think it is misogynistic in the sense of having it like brutally out for women in a systemic way and how it shows its characters. Like there is clear affection in certain sequences for the characters they've built. But this is where you kind of have to bring in the Freudian framework. Because this movie very, very much is following a Freudian arc. It is about the death drive. It is about the sex drive. It is about mere stage identification and the difference between selves. And it's actually not just Freudian. You would also bring in Lacan here, and you would bring in Jung. This is all stuff that I'm very well versed in film studies, because we are the last discipline that still takes this seriously.
It's a lot of like late 19th century, early 20th century psychoanalysis stuff. It's all over here.
And I actually think in the film studies way we discuss this stuff, End of Eva does it in a fairly advanced and interesting way, certainly on a visual level, and there's a lot of connections going on there. But it sort of takes the basic Freudian framework so seriously that you are inevitably misogynistic, even if you don't mean to be. And what I mean there is, if you're not familiar with Freud and the idea of castration anxiety, which is like sort of the basic like, let me just explain this because some people don't know it. God, I didn't think I'd have to do this today. Fuck, I'm supposed to be off of school, Sean.
You're talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion. Of course you have to talk about castration anxiety.
So, castration anxiety is the notion that in the development of the mind, and the mind is singularly masculine, so keep that in mind here.
For Freud.
Freud.
This is all Freudian stuff.
Yeah.
This is not us saying this.
No, this is not me saying this. This is Freud. In the model of the psyche that he builds, and that model is singularly masculine, a significant stage of development is the boy recognizing he has a penis, seeing in his mother that she does not have a penis, that there's something you have to understand that in Freudian psychoanalysis, the vagina is the absence of something. It is not a thing in and of itself. Yeah. This is important for understanding End of Evangelion, if you haven't seen so far. And that fear of that the mother is castrated and he might become castrated is a significant moment in the development of the psyche. And that pours into other things too. You know, you have the different stages of the development: oral stage, anal stage, these sorts of things. That kind of are what they sound like.
Yeah.
They're not all explicit. It's not like the anal stage is not about anal sex, but it's like it's about. But is it? Yeah. But is it? So, and in all of those different psychological sort of benchmarks Freud lays down, the biggest and most obvious critique you can make of Freud is that it's not just about men. It is insularly about a psyche, a model of the psyche that can only be masculine because it is set up in opposition to what is feminine.
Yeah.
And so what is feminine is alien, and it is different, and it is the threat, and it is what you define yourself against the difference that is feminine. And there is no room in that model for a female mind, for a woman having these processes of psychic identification. Again, we're talking about like biological cisgendered men and women. Transgenderism would not work in this at all. Although he writes about what they would have called transvestites, and he's fascinated by that. But you know, I'm one who thinks Freud is I actually like reading Freud. I think he's a very good writer and engaging writer.
He's interesting.
He has a lot of interesting ideas that are applicable, but this is where you have to draw the critique and identify this, that there is, again, I don't think Freud was someone who went out and like hated women and slapped them around and shit, but in his, I don't know, maybe, who knows, but like in his model, you kind of have to call the model misogynistic because it literally is about the psyche being not just default inherently intrinsically male, but needing to see and view the woman as othered and distinct and alien in order to define its own sense of identity. And if this sounds familiar, that's what End of Eva is.
Yeah.
That's what all its imagery is. That's when the fucking cross is going into the clitoris at the end of the movie. I think it's actually going into, like, the vagina and the clitoris is up here. But, like, it's this very little imagery, like the big horrifying things are feminine. And the big things Shinji defines himself against are the feminine. There is a lot of castration anxiety stuff going on here. It is a very 19th century Freudian model in 1997, and
we're watching it in 2020.
And that's where it feels misogynistic. It's like, I would not take that and then call Hideaki Anno a misogynist, because I don't know him, and in other work,
and I would never presume to take a criticism about a work that someone created and apply that to that person,
unless we know something about them and how they live their lives, right? But, like, the movie becomes that in no small part because it buys into that model. And I think what is disappointing that in part is that I think you and I would agree a lot of these female characters have potential to be really interesting characters in their own regard,
they're
right?
incredibly iconic for good reasons. Like there are things about them, there are elements about them that are really effective. I think, like, the performances are great. Like the particularly the voice actress who plays Misato, whose name I can't remember, but she's most well known for playing Sailor Moon in Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
Like Misato, I think, is an awesome character, great character design, great performance that I wish Eva had a lot more interest in and respect for.
Because, yes, it has, and I think that's what makes it disappointing, is it does have these really interesting women who could be singular characters in their own right outside of this insular Shinji-fication, but because, especially in this home stretch, it is following a Freudian model so closely in how, because ultimately what End of Eva is about thematically is the difference between oneself and others, and that process of I identification in the way, like, Lacan would say it, mirror stage kind of thing.
Yeah.
But because it does it through such a strict Freudian model, it is inevitably misogynistic, because that model cannot account for the humanity of women, and neither can this movie.
Yeah, and it's because it can't... Because it doesn't draw a useful distinction in terms of how it actually represents things between the quote-unquote, like, real world of the movie, in terms of, like, the first half, before Third Impact happens. They can't draw a meaningful difference between how it views these characters in that section. It doesn't distinguish them between how it views them in Third Impact, when it is literally, like, psychic representations and weird bullshit like that. And so then the whole movie's worldview then becomes just that Freudian stuff. It doesn't make a contrast there. It doesn't have space to criticize anything about its own worldview, to investigate anything about its own worldview. And this is some of the stuff that, like, one of the reasons why I love Yoshiyuki Tomino's work as a creator is not that he doesn't have a lot of stuff in his work that is sexist. He does, and we've talked about it when we talk about Gundam. But he leaves space to, like, investigate and sometimes be self-critical about that stuff, and he's curious about it. And so his work gives you space, I think, to, like, play with the contradictions and the things about it that work and don't work in, like, sort of social and political senses. And Eva just doesn't have a wide enough scope of its, like, worldview. It doesn't have a big enough understanding of the world and its people and what people are and what make people different and important and how they exist in political systems. It just has no concept of any of those things and can't project any of those things. And so it just falls into this psychoanalytic mush where you just have characters feel like they're acting according to what psychoanalysis demands that they do rather than actual real world psychology, which is what leads you to having, like, Misato kiss Shinji before she dies in a sequence that's like, I get how in a Freudian way this character would do this. I don't think this character would actually do this. This is ridiculous. Shinji's 14 years old. She's like 30. Like, yeah.
It's a scene
absurd.
It's a scene where I love everything that happens in that scene until that moment.
Yeah, and she kisses him. Scene. Yeah, she kisses him, and she's like, "That's." And like what she says in Japanese, in particular, it's like so sexually suggestive. It's like, this is an adult kiss. We'll do the rest when you get back. With obviously she knows that she's going to die. Probably Shinji knows that she's going to die, and that there's not going to be anything more there. But it feels so disingenuous that is something that this character would do. Same thing with Shinji masturbating on an unconscious Asuka. Not something I think that character would do. That's something that only a character would do in this weird Freudified world that has no basis in anything. Or if you want me to really believe that Shinji is that kind of person, which there's been absolutely not one fucking thing in 26 episodes of a TV show and your recap movie or whatever that has led me to believe that this is something that Shinji would actually do.
Yeah, because another thing is a lot of this movie... Well, we're getting a little off track, but we'll come back.
Yeah.
A lot of this movie does rely on a criticism of Shinji as kind of a spiteful, mean person who has done bad things, which I think within the walls of End of Evangelion, there's some compelling stuff there. It does not track at all with the sweet little boy in this movie who's been nothing but victimized.
Yeah, and that's where it feels like it was clear in some of those moments that we were like in Shinji's head and looking through Shinji's POV, which we are in some of the later sections of the movie, then it would make sense of Shinji being that unrealistically self-critical. But in moments where that's not the POV we're taking, the movie still has the same perspective, the same tone. And that's where it feels like when I say the movie is insular or self-centered, that's what I mean, is that the movie can't distinguish anything in it from Shinji's POV, even though it's not actually... Maybe it's actually never from Shinji's POV, because it's so... I don't know who Shinji is anymore. But whatever POV it has, it is so stuck to, and it feels like any psychoanalysis you're trying to apply to it becomes ineffectual because what the movie's trying to do becomes so vague and ill-defined.
Well, especially, I mean, Shinji is... He is a continuation of the character from the show. He is a allegory for depression in and of himself.
He's some sort of weird audience insert for self-hating otaku.
Yep, he's that. He's this aspect of the... So you have at least sort of three Shinjis running through this movie that sometimes align but frequently diverge.
Yeah.
You know, I don't... So the opening scene with Asuka.
Yes.
We kind of keep dancing around it. It's that scene starts out somewhat compellingly to me in him just desperate to have like a friend to talk to and sad that she is unconscious and wanting her to wake up because like her depressive comatose state makes him worry that's what's left next for him because he's falling into it after what happened with Kaworu. That's an interesting start to a scene.
Yeah.
And then the most Eva thing in the history of Eva happens where he shakes her until her clothes fall off and we see her boobs.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is where we're going, aren't we? And then he masturbates, and there's a full-on shot of his hand covered in cum.
Yeah, it is as explicit as it can get without actually showing a penis or ejaculation.
Yes. And then he calls himself disgusting, which, I mean, it's very circular to how the movie is structured, obviously. But yeah, it's...
And that's like the first fucking thing that
That's the first thing that happens in the movie, yes.
So the first thing that happens in this movie is Shinji masturbating over an unconscious Asuka, and the last thing in the movie is him choking her.
Yeah, no.
This is why the movie feels misogynistic.
Yeah, no, if you want to make that argument, it's very easy. Yeah, it's maybe there's some stuff in the middle that's better, but yes, on the polls, you are 100% correct. And the thing is, I think that scene is kind of a microcosm of the movie in and of itself, because that interesting scene I'm describing early on is a scene where Shinji is a defined character with continuity, and Asuka is a defined character with continuity, and there's a relationship in a space between them that is dynamic and fluid. And then it all shuts together for this psychosexual moment of self-hatred and sexual assault, basically.
Yeah.
And it feels like... I see everything, all of your criticisms kind of alive in that one scene, maybe to extremes.
Yeah.
But like... the potential that's there, the thing it could be doing but isn't doing, and the thing it ultimately kind of relies on a lot in one very, very ugly scene that does not start the movie off on a great foot.
And I feel like, if the movie was much more deft, like I can imagine versions of that scene that can have a lot of the stuff about like Shinji's self-criticism about his like sort of sexual desire for her when it's inappropriate. Like there are ways to do all that kind of stuff without going to this, like what is just utterly ludicrous. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, you can have only two... I can only foresee two reactions to that scene. Either utter disgust, or you just cackling out loud at how fucking stupid it is. Because it's so absurd. It's so far. It's such a ridiculous extreme for this character to take. To actually literally physically masturbate until he ejaculates in the hospital room in front of her while she's unconscious. Like, that's so far. It's like... We've joked about, like, sort of half joked about the sex crimes thing, and this is like...
It's a literal sex crime.
Yeah, it is an absolute sex crime. And so it is... But if the movie was, again, more deft, it could have that be... You could portray something like that is more insular psychological, him fantasizing about her in that moment. Like, I don't absolutely need this moment where we actually see Asuka undressed. But if you want to go to those places, you can go to those places and not go to this ridiculous extreme. And part of it just feels like, because it's a movie, they're like, well, we can do it. We can get away with it. We don't have to worry about this being broadcast on TV. So let's push the envelope. Like, it has this sort of like 90s, like almost like vaguely Jackass-esque, like, let's just go for it, bro, feel to that sequence. That is like, I would be kind of interested in some of the dynamics of that scene, of having been someone who was a teenage boy and did have sexual thoughts or feelings at times that were clearly inappropriate. Like, that's an experience that anybody, like whether you're a boy or girl, like anybody goes through that through puberty, because it's part of what puberty is. You can play with that. This is not a way to play with that.
No. Yeah, and I think it's a way to describe a lot of Evangelion, both the end of and the beginning of and the middle of, is maybe taking things too far when you've got an interesting idea and then kind of killing the idea along the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if we even need to say any more than that. Goodbye, people. That's even, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the movie, what comes after that, that's not what I meant, but okay.
It's a great segue, Jonathan.
What happens after that?
Thank you. What ejaculates after that?
Jesus Christ.
It's Eva, it's not me.
I know. But what happens after that is obviously the direct follow-up to the events of episodes like 23 and 24, where finally we get some... Never do we get a full exposition that makes this world make sense or any of that. Like you said, I actually really like what you said about we never feel like at any point that we're on any kind of firm grounding. It's very, very true of Evangelion. But you get something where we know Seal has a weird evil plan, and we know Gendo has a weird evil plan, and now they come into conflict, and Seal wants to do their own version of this. Like, I don't know, you have your pop quiz you're going to give me later, I think. But I, understand at least a little bit more of it, that Gendo wants to do the Human Instrumentality Project, and Seal are like these weird religious zealots who want to basically bring about the end times through Third Impact. And so there's a big battle that goes on. And again, it's extremely compellingly directed. The whole invasion of Nerve and like the amount of people who die and how brutal it all is, and Misato trying to, drive everything from the command center. There's a lot of very good stuff here.
Yeah, this is one of the sequences that feels like it's very heavily referential to the Ideon movie. Like the invasion of Nerve and all that stuff is like, it's pulling a lot of stuff from Be Invoked, the second Ideon film.
I gotta watch all that.
Yeah, it's much better than this.
There's too much.
Space Runaway Ideon Be Invoked is basically like what if Evangelion was good, is my basic pitch of that film.
Oh man, you're the one who wanted to do EVA episodes.
I wanted to be able to talk about it because I fucking watched it.
Yeah, I know, it's all good. Here we are. We're almost done.
Yep.
So that section's interesting, and just the general like tenor and pace and chaotic nature of it, and the editing. It's very well done. It's got great sound design. It's really spectacularly animated. I think I definitely felt good having Asuka get a big final like climactic thing to do, because she obviously just, where they leave her in the show at the end of 24, she never gets any kind of resolution. Yeah. And so having her kind of reawaken, have this big awesome fight with the mass production Evas, which is one of the most spectacular things in the show. The imagery is spectacular. She gets to kick some ass, and then she gets eaten and disemboweled. So
yeah, I wish that her moment of triumph didn't feel so hollow, because she both ultimately gets defeated and killed, and then also everything melts anyways. So it's like all that just feels so pointless, and it's like it's a really cool sequence when you're in it, but ultimately then the movie like kind of very quickly dismisses it and does away with it, which is frustrating.
Well, because it becomes like a very literal end of the world movie. I mean, it's not 100% clear what the state of the world is at the end of Eva, but it's obviously been changed very much, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole world has had sex with itself, weirdly, is what happens. The whole world goes and fucks itself.
It's the process we're in right now, so,
Yes, so then the second half is where things get significantly crazier. Should we talk about Rey?
Yeah, I think, because I kind of just feel like we need to run down the list of the female characters.
Yeah.
Because Asuka gets masturbated on at the beginning and then killed at the middle point. Ritsuko gets shot, right? That happens in the movie.
Gendo kills her,
Yeah, Gendo kills Ritsuko.
Because Ritsuko is still in her female hysteria from Gendo not liking her, which was in episode, I think, 23, where she destroys all the Rei clones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, fucking Ritsuko just gets shit on so hard in the movie and the series.
Yeah, so then she gets murdered by Gendo, dude, is the man that she was, like, weirdly obsessed and in love with for reasons inexplicable. Misato gets killed, but at least her death scene is kind of good, other than her kissing Shinji and all that.
Other than her kissing Shinji, there's a lot of good stuff with her, like putting the conspiracy together, trying to do stuff, trying to get like. If they didn't do the sex stuff, it's actually very touching what she's doing for Shinji, because Shinji was this boy in her care who she was part of manipulating, and she is giving her life to save him. That like feels accurate to that character and her arc in the course of the series. But then, they make it weird and sexual. Yeah,
and I mean, and overall, like, the movie, and this is true of the TV show as well, because I don't think we ever talked about this scene. Eva weirdly, like, slut shames Misato multiple times.
Oh, all over the place, yeah.
Because in the TV show, she has a sex scene with Kaji that's, like, weirdly voyeuristic and gross, where it's just, like, you only hear the audio and you, like, see the wall of a hotel room or something.
It's like a 5-minute scene at the end of the episode where they ran out of money, and so it's just a still image with the sound,
Yeah, and it's just, like, such a weird scene, the way it's, like, it just makes me feel so gross. And then they do the kissing thing here and her, like, suggested comments to Shinji, and then during Third Impact, during Human Instrumentality, there is a kind of echo of the sex scene from the TV show where Misato is sleeping with fuckface.
Kaji.
Kaji in the past during college, and it's another weirdly voyeuristic perspective. Only this time it's literally voyeuristic because it's Shinji watching it and him being grossed out about seeing her have sex. And so,
which is also this psychoanalytic thing of like the mother and there being the father and like someone else claiming her, and that this like sex being tied to self-hatred and all these things. So, and especially to women, it's wrong.
And so it takes all those Freudian ideas and just like piles them on Misato's head. And again, the TV show does this. I feel like End of Eva compresses it a lot, and so it's like all those features are here. So it slut shames her. Rei gets groped by Gendo, right? And that's how like Third Impact starts, is he like grabs her boob and then his hand like goes inside of her and then he moves it down to her crotch. And she like twitches and like sort of like reacts to it.
She does wind up ripping his arm off and killing him.
So that's satisfying, but it also like can't help but like sexually assault her before that moment. And then she's like naked for the rest of the movie in like a weird demon mom.
Yeah, Rei is
like vagina creature form.
I wanted to talk about Rei because Rei never becomes a character over the course of Evangelion.
No, it feels like they kept on trying to, and then they just it felt like they really wanted to in the first like 7 episodes, because that's where her character like story arc thing is, and then they're like, we'll get back to that, and then they never did.
And then in this movie, she becomes like this. Because what she does is she like joins with Lilith and Adam and becomes like the god creature in this world. So it's not. I don't even know if you can call it Rei at that point. It's got Rei's character design.
It's not even. This is the third Rei at this point, right? Because the original Rei was killed as a kid by Ritsuko's mom. The second Rei died in the TV show, and then the third Rei comes in at the end of the TV show. Yeah. That's the Rei in this.
Can I throw a weird? I don't know if it's a theory or an observation or what at you.
Okay.
So, our favorite game of all time, my favorite game of all time is Persona 3. One of your favorite games of all time is Persona 3. I feel like Persona 3 has some pretty clear Eva influences.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But a lot of it, pretty much every one of those feels to me like they looked at Eva and said, what's something Eva did that had potential that it never realized? And then we're going to do that to the nth degree and do it right. Rei feels like one of those where Rei, like, I guess this character design in Persona 3 echoes Rei so much to me that when I thought Rei was a robot long before there's any inclination that she might be a clone or something.
Right.
So I think like that's an element of it. The end of the world and the god stuff and the death stuff and the egg. I mean, so much of End of Evangelion clearly influenced the end of Persona 3, but Persona 3 does it really, really fucking well.
Yeah. So, because, I mean, just generally speaking, that imagery of, like, both the giant sort of, like weird sort of like god stuff at the end and the egg and the destroying the world, like that imagery, it's not just Persona 3, there's lots of things that have taken that in otaku culture in different ways, like most of it inspired from Eva. And then with the Aegis stuff specifically, Rei is one of the early examples of a character. So if people know what tsundere is, which is what we usually call Asuka's tsundere, which is a character that is like on the outside seems very like arrogant and mean and like is kind of like a bully, but on the inside is only doing that to hide like the feelings that they have, and then eventually over time they become more affectionate towards the main character. So the character archetype. So an adjacent character archetype is something that's called a kudere. Ku as in like cool, and that's what Rei is. And so that's a character that seems very emotionless, but then actually has some like an affection deep inside for almost certainly the protagonist character, who's some sort of like weird wimpy dude, because it's always some weird wimpy dude in these kinds of shows, like with Shinji and Eva. And then so it's like they seem very emotionless on the outside, but then actually have this like deep level of affection, sometimes almost in an obsessive way, with kind of like with Rei. So yeah, that I guess is definitely like in that ballpark. Like she's much more well defined. Like couldn't quite put her in any one of those stereotypes, but like it's clear that it's like a platform that they used to build her off of in terms of like the character archetypes in anime style stories.
Yeah, I mean, Aigis might be the best character in the history of gaming, so that's hard to compare her to anything. Yeah, she's certainly better drawn than Rei.
Yeah, but Rei in the character archetype that Rei is a part of and kind of helps popularize is definitely an inspiration for Persona 3 and like hundreds of other things.
Oh, absolutely. And that imagery at the end, everything once Rei goes God mode and is consuming the earth and the like literally parts of the Eva logo she turns into with her wings. And
that stuff is all the stuff at the ending that I really like, because I think that's all really spectacular. The problem is that that's all intercut with like weird flashbacks where people are talking and like at a mile a minute about bullshit that doesn't matter. That I wish it was. Honestly, I could just do without those cutaways and just have like the weird imagery of Rei doing all that bullshit.
Oh, I know, and even like. And if it weren't so explicitly tied to these other things, some of like the vagina imagery and the impregnation stuff going on would be kind of interesting if it weren't in this hierarchical framework that we know is so toxic. You know, because they go really explicit. Because for a while she has like the inserts on her hands that the world is being sucked into that are, you know, they're vaguely vagina-like. But there is later, like near the end, it opens on her head and it's literally like labia, clitoris.
Oh yes, no, yes. Like, it is. Someone looked at an anatomy textbook to be like, let's make sure this is as detailed as we can.
Yes. Anywho, and I don't know if that fully works for me, but you know, I mean, it is. All of this stuff in the sequence where human instrumentality begins and all the... Like, I was surprised how much I liked the sequence where all the different side characters get turned into goop.
Yeah, that's good.
That's horrifying and striking. You know, the whole world becomes goop. Then you have all the god imagery and the world being changed, and everyone is a different cross on the earth and everything together. And then Shinji being like called out, like, this is the world you wanted, and there's the whole like the sea of humanity at sunset, and it's this orange, you know, bay of water with like the sun in the sky. There's a lot of, again, it's like a lot of Eva, it's unbelievably striking. The directorial and animation talent on display is vast.
Yeah.
But the ideas underneath don't amount to a hill of beans, maybe.
Yeah. But it's very like that whole section is very pretty, and the music is good, and like it's so well edited and everything that, again, if it didn't have like all those like intercut sequences with Shinji's psychology, it would be, I think I would like the movie a lot more. Yeah,
but it's also the kind of thing where you understand 100% why it's as iconic as it is.
Oh yes,
because even today there's not a lot like that goes that far, you know. And it's wild. There's a like 2 minutes of like that's a fully live action sequence.
Yep. Yeah.
This is the fourth wall sequence where it directly, like, it has an empty shot of a movie auditorium. It has these distorted images of people in a movie theater, pretty much like all notably men, watching the movie, and like it gets blurred, and there's some scenes of like just daily sort of like Tokyo street life, like street signs and the train and things like that.
This is where isn't this where it intercuts? Like, this is like one of the most famous things that gets talked about a lot of times with End of Eva, is like it intercuts then with like shots of like fan mail that's like die Anno and that kind of stuff.
Yes, that's in there. And it becomes about, it sort of makes this explicit call to the audience about escaping into another world. It sort of draws like Shinji's experience with the Evangelion into the obsessive otaku fan, and like this sort of violent passiveness. And I think there's some interesting stuff there. It's once again somewhere where Shinji just is so incoherent as a character to me.
Yeah.
Because for that connection to fully work, Shinji would have had to be invested in being an EVA pilot at some point in the show, and he never was. Like, he never had the moment like Amuro does when Amuro comes back after deserting in Gundam, and Amuro is too into being a Gundam pilot. But that's before he deserts. Sorry, he becomes super into becoming a Gundam pilot, and that's why he leaves, and like that's that whole arc, is that he so ties his identity into the Gundam. Shinji never wants to be in the fucking EVA, so that never happens.
He never wanted to deal with any of this shit. He just wanted to be home and play his fucking cello and have a good time.
Yes. So I don't know if it fully works on that level, but I do think the fourth wall call is an interesting part of this movie.
It's like a fun, like, it really goes for it. One thing that, like, it's probably, like, absolutely was the right choice to cut this, but I really wish that they hadn't, because it sounds so fucking goofy. Originally, that section would have been extended and had the voice actors that play several of the characters, like Asuka, Rei, because I think there's, like, a brief shot that you can see some of this in Misato, like, dressed up like their characters, living their living like a normal life or something in that world, and it would just be, who knows how long it was planned to be, because there's like some footage of it that was shot before they just kind of like scrapped it. And then at some point I think it would have been that Shinji says like, or Shinji or like some projection whatever just says like, no, this isn't the world I want either, or whatever, and then they go somewhere else, and it probably would have been fucking awful. Because I just imagine that like the quality of the filmmaking in that live action sequence would not have jived well, presumably, with all the like beautiful, like masterful stuff going on with the animation. But it sounds like it'd be so funny to look at watch the lady who voiced Sailor Moon in like a purple wig and like a big red jacket, like trying to deliver dialogue in person.
For some reason, I'm imagining like those live action Disney shows from the 80s and 90s, like House at Pooh Corner, where it was the characters in big like fuzzy suits, instead of like animated. And I know that's not what you're describing, but that's kind of what I want. Where they're like mascots.
It just would have looked like them cosplaying as like Rei and stuff like that.
I kind of wish they had done that. That sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah, it would have been fine. It would have been so bad, but kind of incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, you get all that. You know, crazy shit happens. The world reconstitutes in some form, and then there's the last scene where he strangles Asuka, and then he cries, and she says "disgusting," and that's Eva. Yep. And it does. Yeah, it kind of ends on a down note.
Yeah, I mean, so because then one other thing of note of that ending, just because it's something that when I watched this and then read the manga, I was like, oh, this is where this comes from. So if people have seen the Devilman Crybaby anime on Netflix, which was very good. It's not without its problems, but overall it's very good. That is an adaptation of a manga from like the 70s by Go Nagai, the guy who made Mazinger Z, called Devilman. And the ending to Devilman is fucking great. It's super bleak, and this is it's a very clear takeaway. Like all the stuff on like the apocalyptic world with just Shinji and Asuka, it's like a clear visual callback to the ending of Devilman, which is fucked up and really good. So if people want another recommendation of something that has a lot of End of Eva in it, but is maybe a much more coherent and compelling overall work, Devilman has a lot of that kind of stuff in it, and the ending is fucking killer.
Nice. You know, and this is the part where we're clearly overlapping with the original episodes 25 and 26.
Yeah.
Because the psychological process Shinji is going through here is basically what they did to a greater detailed extent in those two episodes. And obviously those two episodes also, I think, move in a more positive, hopeful direction.
Yeah, like, ultimately, I really, even like if I don't love the show as a whole, I do really love the moment where all the characters stand around Shinji and clap and say congratulations. Like, to me, that is the note that I want Eva to end on, because I think it's so much more real than him choking out Asuka and then crying her going, "You're so nauseating to me." It's just like, okay, I guess that's the ending of this. Like,
the thing is, I think End of Eva could have gone to that place, because like it's all there. It is the same arc. It like very much clarifies what you're watching in 25 and 26. Because it is all about the idea of that eye separation and the difficulty and the joy of living as a separate person with other people you cannot understand, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if the show was ever equipped to fully do that, because it is so insular, you know? But I think there's a version of End of Eva that could have done basically everything it does, but when the world is reconstituting, have everyone congratulating Shinji. And then, like, what if the tag at the end wasn't something dark like that, but it was sort of like something that's sort of in 25 and 26, where it's just like life going on, but life without the Evas and all that other stuff, and like it's not clear if that's a real world now or a hallucination or something, but like that would be fascinating to me. Like, there's a way to do this that has more of a happy ending, because not just to slap on a happy ending, but because I feel like that's part of the arc they're trying to trace.
That feels like what... Like, I don't understand why Eva is as bleak as it is. It's not... In that respect, it's not like Devilman or Space Runaway Ideon that have, like... They have this very, like, cold, methodical way that they look at humanity and, like, address and look at, like the violence that humanity commits, and like it's like that's the themes of what they're dealing with. Is like themes about pacifism and war and things like that. That ultimately comes to this conclusion that like humanity is a self-destructive race. Which, hey, I can get behind that theme because I more or less agree with it, and I think you can tell a really compelling story about that. And I don't think that's what Eva really is trying to be about. And that's part of where it's like teenageriness comes across to me. Is it's like, you're going to get over this. Like, you're going to come out of this and, like, expand your horizons in a couple of years. Right now, you're just stuck in this mode. And you may not feel like you're only stuck in this mode. But if you continue to work on it, like, eventually you will be able to see more than what you're seeing right now. And it just feels like that's what Eva wants to get to. And it just doesn't know how to get there. And so it just ends with fucking Shinji strangling Asuka on the beach, which I just can't find any, like... It's impossible for me to find any significance in. Like, it just doesn't mean anything to me.
It's very nihilistic.
Yeah.
Which is weird for a show that purports to have so much meaning and tries to, and at its best has stirrings of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the end of Evangelion.
You got anything else to say? Because, I mean, you're the one that just went on this whole journey last night.
No, I know.
I've been stewing in this for a long time.
I think I said my piece. I still think I liked the movie, and I'm very glad I saw this movie because it is so clearly so influential. It is so singular and interesting. You know, at the end of the day, I think where I ultimately come down on Eva is I kind of like parts of it from afar. I'm not a fan of the show. I don't ever really see myself rewatching the show, but like I guess I'm glad I watched it all to like understand it. And I definitely feel like End of Eva felt to me like maybe the pot of gold at the end of the tunnel or at the end of the rainbow, in terms of like there's something meaty there, and it's not all stuff I like and approve of, but like I'm glad to have been able to dive into it, and I feel like I maybe have some closure on whatever this crazy thing is. It's
definitely like the most like coherent and like self-consistent part of Eva.
Yes.
Like it feels, whether you love Eva or hate Eva, it is like the most Eva of anything in Eva.
I agree. And someday, when the fourth movie in the rebuild cycle is out, I do think we should do a third episode of this and talk about those, because I am interested to see what an Anno 10 plus years later, who is grown up more and done other stuff, does with this, and I've heard good things about those movies.
Yeah, and from what I understand, like by the time you get to the third movie, it deviates really heavily from...
There's a 20-year time jump in there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's wild. I've read a little bit about it too, and I'm... Like, you know, I know Kaworu becomes one of the main characters, and I liked that character a lot, so I'd like to see him beyond one 20-minute episode. So, you know, I think we'll revisit this at some point.
That's another Persona 3 connection, is the dude who voices Kaoru is the protagonist from Persona 3.
That's where I knew that voice from. Yeah. There's so much of anime is being like, God, I know that voice. Who is it? Where are they from?
Yeah.
Yes. So I also want to just give another shout out. I said this last time. I just want to say it again. I do think the actress who voices Shinji does a just phenomenal job. It is, I think, that's one of those things where I watch and like, this is part of why Eva has the fame it has. Is all the voice performances are great, obviously, but I think Shinji, there's something so unique and haunted. I think she honestly gives more to the character than she's given. And it is a really special performance. So
yeah, I think the performances across the board are really good. And like it's, you know, obviously I've been dunking on this movie pretty hard, but again, I don't want to make it feel like people who like Eva or really like this movie, because I know that there are people who don't necessarily love the TV show, but they think the movie's really cool. That this means that like I think you're bad or wrong for liking this stuff, because I get why people like it, because there is stuff in here that is spectacularly well done. It's just, for me, the balance is not there. And if I had watched it at the right time in my life, I probably would have been more like kind of committed to it.
Yeah.
But it is hard for me to fully commit to it with the problems that I have with it.
Indeed. I think Eva on the whole, I guess my last thought is exactly what you were just saying. This feels like a show that is probably best enjoyed if you are a like 14 to 17-year-old boy, and maybe you can revisit it later in life and kind of feel some of what you felt then. But I don't know. As 27-year-old men, I just it doesn't feel like it's really made for any part of the world experience that I have or see now.
Yeah, I agree. So,
are you going to quiz me?
Yeah, so now it's time to get to our post-test. So it's the same questions. I know some of these you're definitely going to be able to answer.
Okay.
Some of them, I suspect you still will not be able to answer. Because basically almost none of them you answered correctly last time. They're like 2 or 3.
Yeah, so to recap, you gave me a pre-test last week when I had just seen the 26 episodes of the show. I gave as much as I could. Now we have the real.
And these are all just plot-related questions, because we didn't basically talk anything about the lore of Eva, even though it's pretty densely in End of Evangelion. But it's there. And again, if you really care about the lore of Neon Genesis Evangelion, I think it's a PS2 game called Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 that tells you everything you need to know, that is like based on like script notes and interviews with Anno about the answers to all these questions, that maybe I'll try to address some of them to the best of my memory when we get to these. So number 1, I think you should be able to answer this now, because you definitely couldn't before. What is the Human Instrumentality Project?
That is what Gendo is planning, where all of humanity will be melted into one singular consciousness. This is, I think, how he's planning to join with Yui, his dead wife. And it is the method by which, all of humanity's minds will become one, and in some way that will make us like free of conflict and whatnot, right?
Yeah, very good. And you then just basically answer the next question, what is Gendo trying to do, which is the Human Instrumentality Project. And you got the motivation right. It is that he wants to meet with Yui because he's just obsessed with his dead wife, and he has been for a long time, and made like weird clones of her and shit.
I wanted to, just one note. I like Gendo's last scene in this movie where like Rei calls him out on his shit as he dies. He still did not get the comeuppance he deserved.
Not enough. Yeah.
There needed to be... I'm just amazed there's no confrontation between him and Shinji at the end here. How did this not end with Shinji killing his dad?
Yeah, this is what... the last confrontation between Shinji and Gendo should have just been like the end of a Yakuza game, where they both stand on top of a fucking skyscraper, rip their shirts off, have big tattoos, and just beat the shit out of each other.
Also, it could have been super Freudian, because, if you wanted to go for it, you just go with the Oedipus complex, and Shinji kills his dad and then jumps into his mother's womb or something. That's Oedipus.
Yeah, all he does is, he doesn't even kill his dad. He just skips straight to the mother's womb bit.
Yeah. He missed a step.
Yep. So then, next question. What was Yui Ikari trying to do? What was her whole deal?
Okay, there is a scene at the very end of the End of Evangelion where it is her in the park with that professor dude. And she says she wants to build the Evas at some point, because if they imbue them with the soul of humanity, then the soul of humanity will live forever. And it's heavily implied that her soul is in Eva Unit 1, Shinji's Eva. And they even do this kind of thought process that we see illustrated out, where even if Earth dies, the Eva will survive and take a piece of humanity with it. Am I on to something?
Yeah, okay. You basically nailed it. And yes, so the soul of Yui Ikari is inside of Eva 01, which is why it's so weirdly protective of Shinji and all of that stuff.
So he's literally going inside his mother every time. Yeah.
Which we're going to put the post-test on hold, because this is a point I wanted to make that I forgot to make, because we didn't get to it last time, because there are hints of this fact in the TV show, but it's very vague and you didn't quite pick up on it yet, so I didn't talk about it. One thing that and this is a very personal taste thing. I know that there's some people that like this. I just tended not to. I really don't like it when people just make metaphors literal in their stuff.
Yeah.
And so, because I think it's so much more artful and interesting when metaphors are metaphors. Eva takes this thing. I think this is one of the things that people say, oh, this is why it's a deconstruction of the mecha genre. Look, it turns the mecha into this womb-like thing. It's well, it literally makes it his mom, and it literally makes it a womb with a fucking umbilical cord and amniotic fluid inside of it. It is just a womb. It's not a metaphor.
And also his insertion into it is through a phallic object. That's what the tube is.
It is just a womb. There's no metaphor going on there. That's just literally what it is.
Surrounded in fluid. There's amniotic fluid and there's the umbilical cord. Yes.
It's not symbolism anymore. It is just that thing. It's so literal. I can't even call it really a metaphor. One of the things that's great about Gundam is Gundam already has literally all of that in it. It's just metaphor. So, like, if you get to the Ramba Rao section is a really good example of that whole sequence if you want to read it through a Freudian lens. And what's great about Gundam is if you don't want to use a Freudian lens, you don't have to, because it gives you options. Eva, you cannot pick another lens. There's no other perspective with which you can look at Eva and understand anything. It has to be Freudian. But in Gundam, you have the whole sequence with Ramba Rao, where that starts with Amuro getting rejected by his mother. That he tries to go home, return to the womb in that sort of metaphorical sense by returning to his mother, and he can't anymore because he's grown up, he's become corrupt. He's like masculinity has effectively become corrupted and violent. He can't return to his mother anymore. And because of that, he then clings to the symbol of his masculinity, which is the Gundam, which is also a womb-like structure that he hides inside of and protects himself. So he replaces the literal mother with an artificial womb, which is the Gundam. And then when Captain Bright tries to take that artificial womb away from him, Amuro can't deal with the stress and anxiety from that, so he takes it and runs away with it. During that process, he encounters Ramba Rao, who is a representation of like idealized masculinity in the world of Gundam. He has this sort of like very constructive relationship with this beautiful woman, Hamon. He's a great leader to all of his men. All of his men love him. He's very cool and got a big mustache and a nice burly voice. He's incredibly manly. And he's got the only other mecha so far that goes toe-to-toe with the Gundam, which is the Goof. And so then Amuro gets into a fight with him. This is your whole Oedipal thing where he has to kill the father to sort of like prove himself and prove his own masculinity. In that process, the womb is literally sliced open. And Amuro is forcibly removed from the womb because in combat it is destroyed. And Ramba Rao tells him, this is not you. You are not doing this. This is your machine. This is your womb. This is what you're writing inside of that is giving you power, but it's not yourself. You're still just a boy. And from that point forward, Amuro changes his whole view about masculinity and is removed from the womb. All that is in Gundam. It is baked into the show. And if you want to apply a psychoanalytic lens, it is there. But it is there as an option, which is what makes Gundam really fucking good and Eva mostly tedious to me.
Gundam is so fucking good.
It's so good.
I don't think we've stressed that enough through these discussions, Sean. Gundam makes Eva look fucking pathetic.
Yes.
I think I could have enjoyed Eva a little bit more if I'd never seen Gundam. It's like, to me, like, you know the meme of there's the boyfriend and the girlfriend, and the boyfriend is looking at another woman, and the girlfriend is like, what? The girl is Gundam, the boyfriend is anime fans, and the other woman is Eva.
Yes.
It's like, you have this perfect, beautiful partner. What are you doing looking at this floozy over here?
Yeah.
That's what Eva is. Gundam will be there for you. It will love you. It will give you substance.
Yeah, Eva is like a one-night stand that may seem appealing, but Gundam...
You're probably going to feel bad in the morning.
Yeah, you're going to feel bad about it in the morning. There's going to be a real walk of shame, and then, eventually you'll find and meet Gundam and marry Gundam, and Gundam will be a lifelong partner.
It'll be there for you for 40 plus years.
And maybe there'll be some like spin-offs that you're like, is Sea Destiny really worth it? I don't know, but I've always got Mobile Suit Gundam to come home to.
That metaphor definitely broke down, but it's good.
We'll get to see Destiny eventually. Well, because we're moving into post Eva Gundam shows soon.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Anyways, I just had to get all that off my chest.
No, I'm glad you did.
Talked about it.
That was a great reading of Gundam, and I think it says all we need to say about Gundam versus Eva.
Yeah, and we had to get some Gundam. This is still technically Weekly Suit Gundam. We had to get some Gundam talking here. Okay, so we just did Yui. Moving on. What is the Spear of Longinus?
It's the spear that they stabbed Jesus with. In the show, it's the big spear that I don't know where it came from. It's on the moon. Shinji gets it at one point in the show, but then there's also a fake spear that they use against Asuka. I don't fucking know, Sean.
Okay, we'll address that.
Okay.
If I give you the answer to that, I feel like I'll give you the answer to some of these others.
Okay.
What is Third Impact?
It's the sequel to Second Impact.
Okay.
That I think I don't know what First Impact is, but Second Impact and Third Impact are both pretty clearly confirmed here to be man-made catastrophes orchestrated by Seal that have thrown the world into chaos. And Third Impact is what will happen if an angel touches Adam and it starts a calamity that, like, when it actually happens, I'm not really sure what's going on.
Yeah.
Because then human instrumentality happens and that's a little clearer. So yeah.
As far as I know, I think you're basically right, and I think effectively human instrumentality and Third Impact are more or less the same thing. This is one of like the big negative points about End of Eva is I think it does a very bad job of distinguishing Gendo, what Gendo's trying to do, and what Seele or Seal is trying to do. Because I think it's basically the same, only like with some slight nuances that I think maybe like in Seele's version, only like the elite will join the just all of humanity. Like it's just not very clear.
No.
So Third Impact is like a variation of human instrumentality.
Okay.
But I think human instrumentality, like all human instrumentality projects are Third Impacts. Not all Third Impacts are human instrumentality projects. If that makes sense.
This is actually one thing I'm interested in with the rebuild movies because I know they go into this more with Third Impact because it actually happens and then story continues after.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Next question. What were the other impacts? So we have a first impact and a second impact.
No idea what the first impact was. Mm-hmm. Second impact, I mean, I know it's the thing in the lore that, like, brought the world to the state it's in.
Yeah.
But, like, what caused it, other than there's this vague connection between Seal and the second impact, I don't fucking know. Global warming?
Okay.
The coronavirus. The coronavirus is second impact.
Right. Yeah, we're out here making our Eva memes in 2020.
The re-election of Donald Trump will be third impact. Yeah. That's when we all fucking melt.
Okay, moving on. What is Adam?
I feel like I have less of an answer for this than I did last time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Because don't Adam, Lilith, and Rey all, like, join together in this movie? And, like,
yes.
Lilith is very clearly the being that birthed humanity. Like, there's enough of, like, Kaworu calling humans the Lilin, and Lilith being referred to as mother, and, like, Rey says Tadaima when she gets inside of Lilith. And so Lilith is, like, very clearly that, like, is the mother of humanity, God figure. I don't know what Adam is. And we even find out in 24 and then at the end of this that the thing that they were calling Adam down on the cross is actually Lilith.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So this one, I'll answer. So, like, there's a more complicated answer here, but the basic answer is, like, it's that weird little fetusy thing that they found in the ice in the TV show. This is, like, one of my favorite things that happens off camera in Eva is Gendo fucking, like, injects that into his body or something. It's because that's, like, it's in his hand, which is so that they can have him sexually assault Rey to inject Adam into her. Because that's when she fuses with Adam, is when Gendo puts it inside her.
I got none of that.
That's what all of that is. That's how she joins with Adam, and then obviously you see her physically just join with Lilith.
Okay, I got exactly 0% of that I understood.
Okay, so Eva's doing its job then. You basically answered the next question, which was what is Lilith?
Yeah.
It's the big, weird white creature that's underground. That is, so people lead you to believe it's Adam for reasons I don't think I think it's just like bullshit. I think it's like,
yeah.
I think that was originally supposed to just be what Adam was. And then they changed their mind and said, "This is not, now it's going to be Lilith."
Because here's the thing, Sean. You actually didn't tell me what Adam is. You told me, like, where we see it in the show. I still don't know what Adam is.
We'll answer that because, yeah, I'll get that to the end because I feel like that'll just give away too many of them. Which, again, the show and the movies never tell you.
Right.
It's only Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 or its Japanese title, Neon Genesis Evangelions. So good.
So good.
Such a good name. But yeah, so that's what Lilith is. What are angels? These are specifically the angels that are attacking in the TV show and all that stuff.
Again, I feel less confident now.
Yeah.
Because I think last week I just gave you the answer. They're the things attacking, right?
Yes.
But I don't know, like, because now I'm like, did Seal create them? Because what they want is for an angel to touch the Adam, the thing. I don't know. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they are. I'm just going to say I'm more confident this week in saying I don't know.
Okay. Well, angels are the children of Adam, is the answer I would
obviously,
accept.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you know this one because you kind of said it. What are the Lilim?
The humans.
Yeah, humans are Lilim, which are the children of Lilith, which is what Kadu calls us. What is Seele, or Seal?
They're the evil shadowy organization that speaks via big tablets, and they are I think there's some kind of weird, like, religious death cult that follows the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they want to bring about the end times, basically.
Yeah, I think that's more or less right. I think there's, like, some implication that, like, the leader of Seele is, like, a cyborg man who's been alive for, like, hundreds of years or something. Doesn't that kind of get implied in the movie? From what
I didn't notice that. Maybe it did.
Like, yeah, one of the guy who's, like, the figurehead of Seele that they cut to a couple of times is, like, a weird looking dude, and I think he's supposed to be super old, but I don't remember. Moving on. What are the Evas?
Okay, so they are pieces of Adam, right? Grown into... Okay.
I think some of them are made from Adam.
But some of them are made from Lilith.
Yes. Which one is made from Lilith?
Eva 1 is definitely made from Lilith.
Eva 1 is made from the legs of Lilith, which is why Lilith has no legs when she's like pinned up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I mean they are biological because it's confirmed that like the purple stuff is not armor plating, it is to lock them in, and they do have their own brains, but they don't have their own souls. Eva 1 has the mom's soul in it, and then there's a biological link between the pilot and stuff, and they fight. But then there are also these like magical, mystical beings that can like bring about end times and go live forever and stuff. Again, I feel less confident on this than I did last time.
You're basically right. Whose soul is in Eva 2? Do you know?
Fuck, no.
Which is Asuka's Eva.
No. Her mom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Her mom. That's like vaguely implied in the movie.
I thought that was just like an allegory and like...
No,
like,
again, this is the problem with Neon Genesis Evangelion. Kind of, there are no allegories or metaphors because it's all made too
I kind
literal.
of liked the moment where Asuka is like, my mom is here, but I thought it was more of like a...
No, she means literally her mother is there because she's inside her mother's womb because her mother's soul is in Eva 2. That is literally what is happening. That's not a metaphor.
Remember when I said I liked End of Eva? Never mind. Fuck this. No. That's like one of the few moments I like genuinely thought was cool. No, fuck this.
All right, moving on. What is the door of Guf? Or alternatively, if you want to, what is the chamber of Guf?
It's the vaginas on the big ray hands, right?
I think so. Who's the character who says the chamber of Guf is opening?
Isn't it the professor guy?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite moments in the End of Eva. Is it just cuts to him and he just shouts, "The chamber of Guf is opening!" And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, old
But
man?
again, I'm telling you like where we see it. I don't know what it actually is.
So, because I just had to do research on this one because I really have no idea. Apparently, in like some kind of Hebrew lore, the chamber of Guf refers to the place where like souls go, either before they're born or after they die. I don't remember, but it's like it has something to do with like places where souls go. So I think he's like, oh, the chamber of Guf is opening, so our souls are going to get sucked into human instrumentality, I guess. Next question. What is the Black Moon? Which is something you had no idea of in the TV show, but it's more prominent in the movie.
I still have no idea.
Okay. Final question. The fuck is Pin Pin?
Best character on Evangelion still. He's a cool
is he
penguin.
Even in the movie? I don't remember.
He makes a brief appearance in like the dream sequence where Shinji first chokes Asuka in their house.
Right, I forgot. It's the second time he chokes Asuka.
Yeah. But Pen Pen, I think they need to do a spin-off about Pen Pen. That's the Eva thing I really want to see.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all my questions. So you did a little bit better than last time. Still pretty vague. So,
I think we're really putting Eva on test more than me here. But.
Oh yeah, no, this is not me. It's blaming you. That's the reason why I had this idea was like, let's see how much of this, without doing any outside research, is effectively communicated.
Because I've done none. I've been good about this.
So what I'm about to tell you again is stuff that there's no way you'd know this from the TV show because it's just effectively not in the TV show. It's effectively stuff they kind of created for the pitch in sort of like lore Bible vaguely of Eva. Which changed a lot, obviously, during production, which was then game development studio got access to when they're making a video game that both kind of retells the events of the game, but then also expands on some things. So, somewhere out in space, there are these things called the first ancestral race. We don't really know much about them, what they're doing, what they were up to, but we do know that there were at least two of them. One of them is Adam. Adam comes to Earth in the primordial history of Earth as what is called a seed of life. Him impacting the Earth, by the way, is what is the first impact, and it's what creates the moon. Just so you know.
Okay.
So the white moon is Adam's ship that he took to get to Earth to help create life. He has several children. Those children are the angels, except for Kaudu, who's created later. He's not one of the original angels. This is the part that I think is very funny. Again, this is just like if you just read the Neon Genesis wiki, this is what it tells you. Is that Lilith is another one of the first ancestral beings, but she came to Earth by accident. Don't know why, don't know what the fuck that means. She's not supposed to be here. She just kind of ended up here. Her being on Earth and like having two ancestral fucking whatever on Earth at the same time is bad. And so the Spear of Longinus was an artifact that Adam had that is like can kill or like disable the first ancestral beings. And it's like, we can't have two of these fuckers here at the same time, so we're gonna paralyze Adam, and Lilith will be the one here. Lilith came to Earth in the Black Moon, and the Black Moon embedded underneath the Earth's crust, and that's what, like, Nerve HQ and, like, the whole city is built inside of the Black Moon, which then separates from Earth when Rey becomes the super god being over the course of End of Evangelion. And so then Lilith creates, like, the primordial ooze or whatever that eventually helps create life. And so all life on Earth that we know it, not technically just humans, but I think all life on Earth is technically Lilim, and that is the children of Lilith. And Adam's, like, body is somewhere in the Earth's crust. At some point, an organization called Sele discovers the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we don't really know almost anything about. The Dead Sea Scrolls is maybe secretly the most bullshit thing in all of Eva lore, because it's just like vague prophecies that Adam brought to Earth for reasons nobody knows or understands or why. But I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are how they eventually find Adam. Sele conducts experiments on Adam, and those experiments create the second impact, which is like destroys half of Earth and all that kind of bullshit. And the consequences of the second impact, as far as we think we understand it, is that Kaudu is born as a human angel. Because a human made contact with the body of Adam, and Adam was mostly destroyed and left only a small, like, little bits left, and it's slowly regenerating itself. And I think that's most of the lore that we missed.
Can you imagine if in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, he never told you what the ring was? And then you never found out what Mordor was. You just know it's out there somewhere. It's like,
and then you read a wiki and you find out that the ring is an alien.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay.
Fuck this shit, man. Okay. Next week on Weekly Suit Gundam.
Important point. I read that wiki. I still don't really know what Pin is.
Next week on Weekly Suit Gundam, we are going to talk about something that is so much better than Evangelion. Infinitely better than Evangelion. Yeah. And it is called Mobile Fighter G Gundam. And it is the only good thing left in this godforsaken world.
Yes. Pretty soon, Jonathan, this podcast of ours will glow with an awesome power. Its burning microphone will tell us to record this. Here we go! Shining Podcast!